Chapter 223. Huge waves rolled and rocked, and water vapor soared high into the sky. Wu Qi was riding on the back of a red-haired iron-shell turtle, whose back was over 300 feet in circumference, and was rushing forward along with the waves. In Longyuan River, the overall strength of the aquatic demons had been greatly improved. Combined with the dragon essence water channel that was passed down from the ancient times, the mighty army of aquatic demons soon arrived at the Spirit Tapeworm River, which was the closest tributary to Great Dream Marsh. The Spirit Tapeworm River stretched for several tens of thousands of miles, and it was inhabited by only one frightening creature, the Spirit Tapeworm. It was a frightening parasite as thin as a hair, and its body length ranged from 3 inches to 300 miles. It lived as a parasite in the bodies of all kinds of powerful creatures, feeding on their blood essence. The strongest spirit tapeworm had a body length of 300 miles, and its overall strength was comparable to a peak-stage nascent soul demon beast. Once it bit through the skin, even a flood dragon would have all its body fluids sucked dry in an instant. Fortunately, the spirit tapeworm was also an aquatic demon insect, and was naturally controlled by the flood dragons from the Dragon King mansion in Longyuan River. Therefore, Weining Dragon King had gathered all the spirit tapeworms in this spirit tapeworm river, and asked them to occupy it as their own territory. As for the other aquatic demons, including Lehai, Han Zhu, and Tan Shui, none of them dared to take a stroll in the spirit tapeworm river, and the spirit tapeworms would never step out of the river. Once they left the river, they would be attacked by hundreds of millions of aquatic demons. The mighty river water rushed into the Spirit Tapeworm River, causing the water level of the less than 30 miles wide Spirit Tapeworm River to rise abruptly. Suddenly, on the surface of the White River, a large number of bizarre crimson creatures emerged, wriggling and wriggling. Sitting on the back of the red-haired iron-shelled turtle, Wu Qi suddenly saw millions upon millions of spirit tapeworms on the surface of the river. He felt all the pores on his body suddenly tighten, and every single hair on his body stood up. An aura of desire for blood and energy essence that bordered on madness rose abruptly. Those spirit tapeworms, which were as tiny as hair and had varying body lengths, were emanating a greedy aura that could frighten anyone. Countless spirit tapeworms were rolling and rolling on the surface of the river. Suddenly, the surface of the Spirit Tapeworm River, which stretched for several tens of thousands of miles, was covered with a layer of several miles thick worms. No one could tell how many frightening vampires were hiding in this place. Even Weining Dragon King, who was standing right next to Wu Qi, had his body twitching violently. All the aquatic demons who had raised the great flood and rushed into the Spirit Tapeworm River had an unusual expression on their faces. They forced themselves to remain calm as they stared at the endless sea of spirit tapeworms in front of them. When it came to population size, if the spirit tapeworm claimed that their population was the second largest, none of the aquatic demon clans in Longyuan River would dare to claim that their population was the first. The number of spirit tapeworms in the entire Spirit Tapeworm River should be counted in the trillions. That did not include the number of spirit tapeworm eggs, which were hundreds of times smaller than the grains of sand, that were densely packed at the bottom of the river. Nearly 1,000 extremely fine red lines rose from the river. Wu Qi scanned through these red lines with his divine will, and found that they were actually nearly 1,000 spirit tapeworms, who were emanating a faint aura of nascent soul realm. Their tribe was too big, so they had the most powerful warriors. Although the overall strength of these spirit tapeworms was the weakest among all the aquatic demons of the same realm, their frightening innate divine abilities and their enormous population had made them a frightening existence in the water system of Longyuan River. A spirit tapeworm with a body length of nearly 400 miles, with a tiny red cloud hovering above its head, and a fist-sized twisting human figure looming in the middle of the cloud, was slowly swimming toward them. A sharp voice came out from the mouth of the twisting human figure in the red cloud. Old Dragon King, are you here as a guest in the Spirit Tapeworm River? Hee, what a coincidence. A few days ago, our children had just caught some blood and flesh from the Great Dream Marsh, and we were reluctant to enjoy it. Old Dragon King, you can join us for a feast. This was a spirit tapeworm who had broken through peak-stage nascent soul realm, and had formed a thread of nascent divinity. He was the current master of the Spirit Tapeworm River. His attitude toward Wanying Dragon King was extremely respectful and submissive. Although the spirit tapeworm had a huge population and possessed frightening innate divine abilities, they were, after all, aquatic insects, and were naturally restrained by flood dragons. If a flood dragon was possessed by a spirit tapeworm, it would have its blood essence sucked dry and die. However, a flood dragon only needed to let out a dragon roar to kill countless spirit tapeworms. Because of this natural restraint, these spirit tapeworms dared not show any neglect when facing Wanying Dragon King. With a deep and powerful voice, Wanying Dragon King said, "Old Tapeworm King, you don't have to be so courteous. The purpose of our visit today is to flood the Great Dream Marsh. Summon all the children in your clan, and today, I'll allow your spirit tapeworm clan to carry out a massacre in the Great Dream Marsh. All the demon beasts in the marsh that are not aquatic creatures of Longyuan River are free to be absorbed by you." That old fool He Qianqiu and his children are trapped in there. Just don't suck him dry. Old Tapeworm King let out a strange laugh and said, "Old Dragon King, are you looking for trouble with the ice earthworm? That's a great idea. I've been thinking about his blood essence day and night, and I've been thinking about him for several thousand years. Since Old Dragon King wants to touch him, that's the best news." With a shake of his body, a strange ripple suddenly spread across the entire spirit tapeworm river. Within the coverage of Wuqi's divine will, countless spirit tapeworm eggs hatched at the same time from the few miles thick mud at the bottom of the river. God knew how many 3-inch long spirit tapeworms broke out of their shells at the same time, merging into the countless other spirit tapeworms on the surface of the river. The entire spirit tapeworm river abruptly took a crimson hue. Countless wiggling spirit tapeworms gave the illusion that this river was a living creature. Wuqi had goosebumps all over his body. Standing next to him, the catfish flood dragon was shivering uncontrollably as she summoned a large sheet of water to wrap her body up, isolating her body from the outside world. Although she knew these spirit tapeworms were aquatic demon insects, and the restrictive spell of water ripples had no effect on them, she still felt that she would feel much better with an additional layer of isolation. All the other big and great demons were feeling uneasy as well. One after another, they unleashed a magical spell to isolate their body from the outside world. The spirit tapeworm river was not a pleasant place to look at. As more and more spirit tapeworms broke out of their shells, the greedy and bloodthirsty aura in the surroundings grew denser and denser. Dragon scales had even emerged on Wanying Dragon King's skin. Obviously, he could no longer endure the visual impact brought by the frightening spirit tapeworms. Taking a deep breath, Wanying Dragon King summoned out the 2 large hammers he always carried with him. With a casual swing of his hand, the vast and mighty white water from Longyuan River rolled out and rushed into the spirit tapeworm river. The old tapeworm king let out a joyful cry, and countless spirit tapeworms in the river began twisting their bodies at the same time, cooperating with Wanying Dragon King in stirring up the waves. A loud rumble echoed out, as the water level of the spirit tapeworm river rose to nearly 100,000 feet high. The vast white water flooded countless mountains and rushed out of the river channel. Pushed by countless aquatic demon beasts and demon insects, it raised countless gigantic waves that stood several miles tall, thrusting towards the Great Dream Marsh, which was located several hundred miles away. The Great Dream Marsh was an ancient marsh that measured approximately 100,000 miles in circumference, surrounded by mountains. Countless years of accumulated mud and fallen flowers and grasses, coupled with the nourishment from the poisonous gases that sprayed out from the Earth's core from a few caves that were filled with murderous energy, the mud in the Great Dream Marsh had reached a thickness of several thousand miles. On top of the mud, even a feather would be sucked into the ground in an instant. Even if a heaven immortal accidentally stumbled into this place, his immortal body would be contaminated by the frightening poisonous gases and filthy energies contained in the mud, causing him to perish. Over the countless years, the frightening Great Dream Marsh had devoured countless formidable demon beasts. In the entire Meng Mountains, only the Lord of Great Dream Marsh, 9-headed ice earthworm, and a group of demon beasts with strange shapes who were born and bred in this marshland could travel freely and live in this frightening marshland. Not only was there a bottomless mud in the Great Dream Marsh, there were also several dozens of small islands on which people could walk and live. The nine-headed ice earthworm had raised a great number of livestock, which were kept on these small islands, the largest of which measured 1,000 miles in circumference. Currently, on a beautiful island that was located near the edge of the marsh, less than 30 miles in circumference, where flowers and trees were luxuriant and exotic flowers and grasses could be found everywhere. He Qianqiu, whose body was covered in blood, was forcibly maintaining a crumbling defensive formation, firmly protecting the several dozens of weak and feeble demon birds around him, defending against the crazy attacks from several thousands of strange demon beasts and a nine-headed strange insect. The nine-headed strange insect had a body that measured approximately 10 miles in length. The lower half of its body looked like an ordinary earthworm, but the upper half of its body had 9 branches, growing into 9 huge bodies, each several miles long. There were no eyes or facial features on these 9 parts of the body. There was only a large, round mouth with a diameter of dozens of feet. When the mouth was opened, it was densely packed with layers of sharp, pitch-black teeth that looked like the teeth of a shark. This strange insect, which had a pitch-black body and was shrouded in a layer of crystal blue cold air, was the owner of the Great Dream Marsh, the nine-headed ice earthworm. At the moment, the ice earthworm was crazily spraying out large sheets of icy wind and snowflakes, attacking the defensive formation that He Qianqiu was maintaining, which measured less than 3,000 feet in circumference. Countless snowflakes the size of a water tank spun at high speed and brutally slashed on the defensive formation that was emitting a faint white gleam, causing sparks to fly and splatter in all directions. The thin defensive formation suffered a tremendous impact, and was about to shatter at any moment. He Qianqiu let out a sharp and unpleasant cry as he kept coughing out mouthful after mouthful of pale golden blood essence, not hesitating to consume his prime energy to maintain the defensive formation. The several dozens of demon birds around him kept howling, asking He Qianqiu to abandon them and leave on his own. However, He Qianqiu pretended he did not hear the cries of these demon birds, and kept maintaining the defensive formation. The nine-headed ice earthworm kept twisting its huge body as if it had gone mad, laughing wildly and saying, "Big white bird, old white feather, no one here can stop you if you want to leave. Why are you protecting your disciples and grand-disciples? We are demon cultivators, we are demon cultivators. Why are you still talking about benevolence, righteousness, and morality? Are you fucking out of your mind? Don't get in touch with those humans outside the mountain if you have nothing to do. Look at what they have taught you." The ice earthworm mocked loudly, "As long as you can escape, you can have as many disciples and grand-disciples as you want. Why are you protecting them at the expense of your own life? Even if you can escape, there are still millions upon millions of disciples and grand-disciples waiting for you in your cave abode. For these several dozens of feathered animals, you are willing to sacrifice yourself? Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to do this? Just run away, I can never catch up with you anyway." He Qianqiu rolled his eyes and coughed out another mouthful of blood essence, strengthening the defensive formation around him. However, he did not say a word. Near the small island, nearly 200,000 soldiers of Qin army were seen standing on wing-shaped magical items, hovering in midair, forming a formation that emanated a murderous aura and completely surrounding the entire island. Within the formation, Zhang Yi, Li Si, Li Xian, Bai Qi, Wang Jian, Wang Ben, Wang Li, and many other important ministers of Qin army whom Wu Qi had met before were gathered here with their magical treasures and magical items in their hands. High up in the sky, a pitch-black dragon chariot was seen being pulled by 9 dragon horses, hovering behind a dark cloud. Ying Zheng was sitting on the chariot, looking thoughtfully at He Qianqiu, who was struggling with all his might. "Yan Dan, your imperial advisor is trapped here. Will you come and rescue him?" "I'm really looking forward to it." A lacquer chest was placed neatly on Ying Zheng's lap. He gently stroked the chest, then suddenly breathed out a deep sigh. Following the sigh of Ying Zheng, a great flood of over 100,000 feet tall suddenly burst out from the peaks of the lofty mountains surrounding the great dreamy marsh. Almost at the same time, a vast expanse of white water burst out from all directions. Amidst deafening rumbling noises, an enormous amount of white water poured down from the lofty mountains, rolling up white water vapor that towered into the sky and rushing into the pitch-black great dreamy marsh. Chapter 224. Amidst the torrent, countless spirit tapeworms hugged each other and formed into numerous red meatballs, each measuring about 1 mile in diameter, rolling and plunging into Great Dream Marsh. To other living beings, the mud and dirty water in Great Dream Marsh was extremely poisonous and unpleasant. Once touched by it, even their bones and flesh would be completely digested. But these spirit tapeworms were even more vicious and ferocious. Not only did the poisonous swamp of Great Dream Marsh fail to kill them, it actually made them even more ferocious. A great amount of deadly poison was sucked into their bodies. Abruptly, their crimson bodies turned pitch black, while dense poisonous gases kept bursting out from their mouthparts. Together with countless meatballs, the torrent plunged into Great Dream Marsh. Driven by millions upon millions of aquatic creatures, it quickly arrived at the small island where Hichiencio was trapped. Countless wiggling meatballs soared up into the sky, then suddenly split apart, transforming into countless twisting spirit tapeworms that leaped towards the Qin soldiers who had formed into a formation in the sky. These pitiful Qin soldiers, whose cultivation base ranged from Xiantian realm to Hotian realm, did not even have the time to activate their armors and unleash defensive mechanisms to protect themselves before the countless spirit tapeworms pounced onto their bodies. Each of these Qin soldiers was possessed by approximately 100,000 tiny, wiggling, and extremely long spirit tapeworms. It was as if their bodies were suddenly covered with long, black, and red hairs. Miserable howls kept ringing out, as the blood essence of these Qin soldiers was quickly sucked dry by these spirit tapeworms. In just a few seconds, several tens of thousands of Qin soldiers were turned into mummified corpses, their shriveled bodies falling down from the sky and falling into the great waves that rolled past them. The torrent came too fast and too sudden. Before the Qin army could change their formation, it was already breached by the torrent and countless spirit tapeworms. In many places, the waves raised by the nascent soul stage aquatic demons smashed down like heavy mountains. Like a walnut under a hammer, the Qin army's formation was smashed into pieces by the waves that were a few times stronger than steel. The formation was shattered, and the Qin soldiers who formed the formation were thrown into the torrent with their bodies broken. Countless spirit tapeworms plunged into the torrent, sucking up all the blood that sprayed out from the bodies of the Qin soldiers. The huge waves surged down from the peak of the mountain. Originally, they were already as powerful as a thunderbolt, and with the addition of a large number of powerful demonic beasts, who were using their demonic techniques to increase the power of the waves, the power of the huge waves was even more frightening. The formation of Qin army was shattered in an instant. Over 200,000 Qin soldiers were either killed or wounded. A few of them who managed to escape from the flood were quickly entangled by countless spirit tapeworms, having their blood essence, energy, and spirit completely sucked away. Zhang Yi and his companions were caught unprepared by the sudden flood. He let out a furious roar, and suddenly, black spirit light burst out from his body, causing a small half of the Great Dream Marsh to tremble. An immeasurable amount of dark mist soared up into the sky from under the ground and fused into Zhang Yi's body, transforming into a vast and boundless magnetic force that was as vast as the ocean. Following Zhang Yi's will, it condensed into a large net and spread out in all directions. Tens of miles in diameter meatballs were caught by the giant net made from magnetic force. Zhang Yi gritted his teeth and pushed the invisible magnetic force inwards. The magnetic forces rubbed against each other and generated a great amount of dark thunderbolts, transforming into countless enormous thunderbolts that darted out in all directions. The tens of meatballs that were surrounded by the magnetic force were instantly shattered by the thunderbolts, while countless spirit tapeworms were turned into nothingness by the thunderbolts. Jarring hissing noises rang out from all directions, as several hundred long and thin spirit tapeworms soared up into the sky, thrusting towards Zhang Yi like agile snakes. When these experts of the spirit tapeworm clan saw that countless of their offsprings were killed by Zhang Yi, they flew into a great rage and attacked together. Zhang Yi sneered disdainfully, then waved his hand and made a gesture in the air. Immediately, countless flying swords condensed from magnetic forces took shape out of thin air, thrusting towards those spirit tapeworms while producing jarring noises. Shrill and miserable howls kept echoing out. The flying swords condensed from magnetic force were shapeless and immaterial, extremely heavy and extremely sharp. Countless sword beams flashed, and immediately, a couple dozens of demon core realm and 3 nascent soul realm spirit tapeworms were chopped into countless pieces by Zhang Yi. That was when the fearsomeness of the spirit tapeworms was revealed. When these severed spirit tapeworms fell into the floodwater, nourished by the blood essence that gushed out from the bodies of the Qin soldiers, each severed limb quickly grew into a new spirit tapeworm. According to the ratio of the length of their bodies, they now shared all the cultivation base of the original spirit tapeworm. One of them, an early-stage nascent soul spirit tapeworm, was chopped into 18 pieces, and the 18 newborn spirit tapeworms shared all the cultivation base of the original spirit tapeworm. Each of them became a newborn spirit tapeworm that possessed the cultivation base of peak-stage Jin Dan realm. Amidst sharp hissing noises, they plunged into the floodwater. After that, 18 tiny mouthparts poked out from the floodwater, opening their mouths and spraying out black poisonous gases that were as sharp as needles and as fast as lightning. All the poisonous gases were extracted from the mud and dirty water of Great Dream Marsh by these spirit tapeworms. They were extremely poisonous and filthy. If any cultivator were to come into contact with them, not only his fleshly body, even his soul and nascent divinity would suffer a severe injury. Zhang Yi was struck with great terror. He immediately sprayed out 3 large flags that glinted brightly around his body, shielding him as he cried out with a stern voice, "Everyone, be careful. We can't just chop these bugs into pieces, we have to use thunder magic to blast them into pieces. Only then can we truly kill them." Baiqi, whose cultivation base had dropped to mid-stage nascent soul realm because he had forcibly activated the bugle of Ing Dragon, gave a cold snort, casually pulled out his sword and swung it into the air. "You mere bugs, how dare you fight against me, the iron armor of Daqin? Come to me now," he cried out with a stern voice. A raging, murderous aura burst out from his body. All the spirit tapeworms within an area of 100 miles around Baiqi suddenly turned stiff. All their life force was completely stripped away, turning into bloody murderous aura that soared high up into the sky and fused into Baiqi's body. Then, he let out a long cry, as the aura around Baiqi suddenly grew stronger. Vaguely, he was showing a sign of breaking through mid-stage nascent soul realm and returning to late-stage nascent soul realm. He kept swinging the sword in his hand, sending out streams of murderous aura that were filled with a deathly aura. Wherever it passed, all the spirit tapeworms within an area of 100 miles would have their life force sucked dry, turning into murderous aura and returning to Baiqi's body. The more Baiqi killed, the more vigorous the aura in his body became. His energy was surging like a great river, and gradually, deafening battle cries were heard coming out from every single pore on his body. Alone, Baiqi was able to suppress all the spirit tapeworms, forcing them to dive into the water and attack the several thousand demon beasts led by Ice Earthworm. However, apart from Baiqi, none of the other people, including Li Si, Zhang Yi, and the others, could inflict any effective damage on these spirit tapeworms, especially Li Xian. His divine ability was in the bow and arrow, and if he were to fight a human cultivator face to face, his skill in archery was almost invincible. However, when faced with an endless number of spirit tapeworms, even though he had shot out all his backup arrows, he could not kill even a few of them. Left with no other choice, they could only randomly unleash their divine ability and kill a batch of spirit tapeworms. After that, Li Si, Zhang Yi, and the others stepped onto clouds and flew back to Ing Zheng's chariot. Ing Zheng stared thoughtfully at the vast ocean down below, then shook his head and said, "This is strange. Yan Dan's army is nowhere to be seen. Why is it the same demon dragon as last time? Su Fu, do you have the confidence to drive the cauldron of you again?" Su Fu bowed solemnly and said helplessly, "Your Majesty, we do not have the divine ability or dermic power to drive the cauldron of you. We need a huge amount of blood essence to perform the blood sacrifice, only then can we activate the item spirit of the cauldron of you and unleash its divine power. However, these demon bugs have devoured all the blood essence down below. Although I want to perform the blood sacrifice, there is nothing I can do." Ing Zheng frowned and snorted discontentedly. Looking at the raging ocean down below, he said coldly, "Then, let's just wait and see." The word "wait" made Li Si and the others shut their mouths. They were standing high above the clouds, looking down at the battle between nine-headed ice earthworm and the countless spirit tapeworms led by Spirit Tapeworm King. The ocean had turned crimson, and countless spirit tapeworms were rolling and wreaking havoc in the water. The several thousand demon beasts brought by Ice Earthworm tried their best to kill several million tiny spirit tapeworms, but they were soon drowned by the endless number of spirit tapeworms. As the bodies of spirit tapeworms were extremely tiny, at the same time, there could be several million, or even tens of millions of spirit tapeworms clinging onto the bodies of the enormous demon beasts, sucking their blood essence. One after another, demon beasts rolled and rolled on the ground, howling miserably as the spirit tapeworms rushed up to them and sucked out their blood essence drop by drop. In just a short 15 minutes, nearly 1,000 formidable demon beasts were killed by the spirit tapeworms. After absorbing enough blood essence, those spirit tapeworms would use a part of their energy essence to catalyze their bodies and increase their strength, while the other part of their energy essence would be transformed into countless spirit tapeworm eggs, shooting out from their tails. In just a blink of an eye, trillions of spirit tapeworm eggs were laid. After being accelerated by Spirit Tapeworm King, these eggs quickly hatched into newborn spirit tapeworms, throwing themselves towards those demon beasts with no regard for their own safety. As for Spirit Tapeworm King himself, he brought a large group of nascent soul spirit tapeworms and tightly entangled ice earthworm. The several hundred miles long Spirit Tapeworm King was like a razor-sharp steel wire, coiling around ice earthworm's body countless times. He tightened his grip on the ice earthworm's body, causing a thin line of blood to appear on its body. Drop after drop of blood essence oozed out from ice earthworm's body, being crazily devoured by those nascent soul spirit tapeworms. Ice earthworm shivered from head to toe in pain, trying desperately to drill deeper into the mud. If it were some other demon beasts with different appearances, as long as ice earthworm entered the mud, he would not be able to chase after him. However, spirit tapeworms had a unique body structure, and their innate abilities were bizarre and ferocious. No matter how strong the poison was, it could not hurt them at all. Countless spirit tapeworms followed closely behind ice earthworm and burrowed deep into the mud, entangling and strangling him. Even though ice earthworm had sprayed out a large sheet of ice and frost, freezing and shattering countless spirit tapeworms, it could not stop Spirit Tapeworm King from strangling him. Natural nemesis, the ice earthworm is finished. Ingzheng stared coldly at the place where ice earthworm had burrowed into the mud, then said in a cruel voice, "Who has the means to deal with these venomous bugs?" We can't use the cauldron of you, but what about the bone of Ing dragon?" Li Si frowned, then said hesitantly, "Your Majesty, although these venomous bugs came along with the great waves, I don't think they are aquatic demons. I'm afraid the bone of Ing dragon can't do anything to them." While Ing Zheng and his company were hesitating, the great waves had swept across Great Dream Marsh, rushing towards the city built by Qin Army on the shore of Great Dream Marsh. The city built by Qin Army measured about 100 miles in circumference, and had a city wall that stood 300 feet tall. It was fully constructed, and was engraved with countless primordial runes and restrictive spells. At this moment, no one knew who was in charge of the defense in the city. As nearly 10,000 practitioners soared into the sky, deep and muffled chanting of spells could be heard coming from the top of the city wall. The city wall began to glow brightly, transforming into a thick layer of light screen that enveloped the entire city. The Qin Army's barracks in the city remained unmoved, but the several tens of thousands of barbarian commoners who were working outside the city were struck with a bloody misfortune. Countless spirit tapeworms swarmed over, and before they could let out a miserable howl, they were already turned into dried corpses by the spirit tapeworms. On the small island where He Qianqiu was trapped, a large white crane, about 1,000 feet long, soared into the sky. It was He Qianqiu's true form. A melodious crane cry resounded through the clouds, "Old demon dragon, I didn't expect that the first person who came to rescue me would be you. Strange, old bear and the other bastards who have no sense of brotherhood, where have they gone to?" Sitting on the back of the iron-shelled turtle, Wu Qi was also looking left and right. Suddenly, he broke out into curses furiously, "That old fool Su Qin. He sent me to be the first one to disturb the Qin army. Now that I've broken through their formation, where are the others? Where are the others? Is he messing with me?" High up in the sky, Ying Zheng suddenly saw Wu Qi. Instantly, a wave of anger rushed up to his head. Chapter 225. High up in the sky, Ying Zheng glared fiercely at Wu Qi with his eagle eyes. The intense gaze made Wu Qi tremble with fear, and he quickly hid behind Weining Dragon King's back. When Weining Dragon King saw that He Qianqiu had escaped successfully, he immediately recalled the military order given to Wu Qi, which only asked him to harass the Qin army. Harass the Qin army? Do I have to risk my life to fight them? Weining Dragon King was an old and cunning man. When he saw He Qianqiu fleeing with a group of severely wounded disciples and grand disciples, he immediately let out a loud dragon roar that shook the sky. "People of Longyuan River, retreat, retreat. My boys, retreat now. The bone of Dragon King is very powerful, and we can't fight them head-on. Retreat, retreat. Whoever stays at the back, don't blame us if you die." The floodwater, which was still wreaking havoc in all directions just a moment ago, rolled back with a loud splash, then fled in a panic together with countless aquatic demons. They came fast, and they fled even faster. Even the spirit tapeworm king, who was fighting the nine-headed ice earthworm in the mud a moment ago, had brought a large number of his clan members and sprung up from the mud, following closely behind the floodwater and retreating towards the spirit tapeworm river. Countless spirit tapeworms had dyed the floodwater crimson, making it look like a pool of blood. Ying Zheng cried out sternly, "Wu Qi, you've ruined my plan again. Now, die." Then, he performed an incantation gesture with both hands. Suddenly, the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent behind Ying Zheng's back swayed, and a pitch-black seal emerged out of thin air. He casually pointed his finger at Wu Qi, and the black seal immediately transformed into a shadow of a dragon while piercing through the air with a deep, muffled noise, thrusting towards Wu Qi's back. Wu Qi felt a fierce wind smashing at his back. Without hesitation, he activated the mid-grade magical treasure-grade defensive armor, the water dragon armor, given to him by Jing Ku. A long cry towered into the sky, as a crystal blue full-body armor emerged on Wu Qi's body. 3 water dragons, each as thick as a fist, wheeled rapidly around him, unleashing a large sheet of crystal blue energy that protected Wu Qi. Swish! The seal smashed the 3 water dragons into pieces, then smashed brutally onto Wu Qi's back. The mid-grade magical treasure, water dragon armor, did not have any defensive strength, and was instantly turned into nothingness by the seal unleashed by Ying Zheng. Wu Qi felt a sharp pain coming from his back, as a wave of energy that came with an eerie aura of destruction, yet at the same time overbearing, penetrated through the water dragon armor and was about to hit him. He had only been cultivating the dragon transformation script for a few days. Even though his physical body had been greatly enhanced, there was no way he could withstand such a terrifying attack. "Ying Zheng, I didn't peek at your wife bathing. Why do you hate me so much?" Wu Qi let out an angry roar as he waved his left hand behind him. 36 golden dragon scales rose into the air and shielded his back along with a thick layer of earthy yellow mist. The black seal smashed through the water dragon armor and smashed brutally onto the yellow mist, knocking Wu Qi several tens of miles away and slamming into a small hill. A mouthful of blood sprayed out from his mouth. Wu Qi felt as if all the bones in his body were broken, and he could no longer control them. Although Wu Qi had taken out all the defensive treasures except for the silver lotus, he was still nearly killed by Ying Zheng with just a casual strike from Ying Zheng. If not for the earth element dragon scale shield being extremely powerful and possessing a defensive strength far greater than ordinary magical treasures, Wu Qi would have been killed by Ying Zheng on the spot. Before Wu Qi could recover from his shock, and before Weining Dragon King, who was also standing on the back of the iron shell turtle, could come to his rescue, Ying Zheng had already let out a furious roar, pulled out the sword of Qin Emperor and thrust it towards Wu Qi. At the same time, fearing that Wanying Dragon King might save Wu Qi, Ying Zheng sneered and formed 9 black seals, thrusting them towards Wanying Dragon King. Together with Ying Zheng were Li Si, Su Fu, and all the famous ministers and generals serving him. The storm-like attacks had prevented Wanying Dragon King, Catfish Flood Dragon, and all the others from rescuing Wu Qi. A sword beam shot down from the sky, slashing viciously towards Wu Qi's back, who was buried deep in the mountain. The sword beam unleashed by the sword of Qin Emperor condensed into a golden flood dragon, which leaped straight towards Wu Qi amidst a jarring dragon roar. Wu Qi mustered all his energy and barely activated the earth element dragon scale shield. A loud boom rang out, and Wu Qi's body sunk a few miles deeper into the mountain. The sword beam was blocked by the dragon scale shield, but the tremendous force it carried had nearly shattered Wu Qi's body. However, the sword did not vanish. Instead, it kept spinning at an incredible speed, piercing through the yellow mist formed by the earth element dragon scale shield like a drill. It seemed determined to pierce through the shield and kill Wu Qi. A dragon cry rang out from Wu Qi's finger, as the item spirit of the black dragon spirit ring poked its head out, its eyes gleaming brightly. A large number of black dragon scales shot out from the black dragon spirit ring, coiling around Wu Qi's body and forming into a mighty dragon scale soft armor that took the shape of a true dragon. The black airwave soared into the sky and fiercely collided with the dragon-shaped sword shadow, completely annihilating the peerless sword shadow. Wu Qi suffered a tremendous shock. His eyes rolled up, and blood kept bursting out from his mouth. The black dragon's soul cried out sternly, "I've used up all the natural energies I've absorbed in the past few days. Do you still have a way to save your life? Quickly think of something, or you'll be finished. Bastard! If you're going to die, don't drag me down with you. Before you die, remember to undo the restrictive spell in my nascent divinity." While speaking, the black dragon's soul nearly burst into tears. If his soul perished because of Wu Qi, it would be an unjust death. Wu Qi chuckled, nodded at the black dragon's soul, and said, "We're good brothers, good brothers. If I die, I'll definitely drag you down with me." This is what the saying "live and die together" means. Glaring at the black dragon's soul, Wu Qi's eyes shone with a ferocious gleam as he roared, "Do your best to protect me. Stop talking nonsense here. If I'm dead, you can't live." Leaping up from the small hill, Wu Qi staggered up to the surface of the water, pointed his finger at Ying Zheng, and roared furiously, "Ying Zheng, I'm going to fuck." Before he could finish a string of curses, the flustered and exasperated Ying Zheng had risen from the chariot, pulling out a large, glinting white seal from under his sleeve. "Wu Qi, you little punk, I'm going to kill you today. I'm going to kill you. Take a look at my imperial seal of Daqin. I've gathered the energy of the human emperor under the heaven and earth, and I'll completely destroy your fleshly body and soul, making you unable to reincarnate forever." Suddenly, a large sheet of bright light shone from the seal in Ying Zheng's hand. Amidst the bright light, 8 ancient characters slowly emerged. Upon the appearance of these characters, Wu Qi, who was enveloped by the bright light, could not move at all, his body stiff as he hovered above the water. Looking at the imperial seal in Ying Zheng's hand, Wu Qi could not help but curse in his mind, "What a shameless bastard. As the emperor of Daqin, how could you use a spirit item like the imperial seal to kill me, a little cultivator of Jin Dan? Can you be any more shameless than this?" Ying Zheng grinned hideously and was about to smash the imperial seal down. A dragon roar towered into the sky from the surface of the water, as Lord Xiansheng's eyes burst with wisps of flame. Suddenly, he transformed into a flood dragon and rushed next to Wu Qi, grabbing Wu Qi and plunging into the water. But, when Lord Xiansheng, who came like a bolt of lightning, had just arrived next to Wu Qi, he was shown by the bright light emitted by the imperial seal, and his movement became 1,000 times slower. Slowly, he wrapped his arms around Wu Qi, inch by inch, then slowly plunged into the water. Wherever the bright light enveloped by the imperial seal shone, not only was the space sealed, even the time was slowed down by 100 times. Lord Xiancheng's movement was forcibly slowed down by 100 times, making him look no different than a snail. Whinnying Dragon King was scared out of his wits. "Yingzheng, if you dare to kill my beloved son, Lao Tzu will fight you to the death," he cried out with a stern voice. Yingzheng grinned hideously and held the bone bell of Ying Dragon in his hand. "Whinnying Dragon King, let's see if you have the qualification to fight me to the death. Today, I've sacrificed 100 years of my life to unleash the Imperial Seal, because I want to kill all of you." Thousands of miles away, on the peak of a lofty mountain, a majestic dark horse was seen munching on a basket full of 1,000-year-old ginseng, 9-leaf Ganoderma, and some other spirit herbs that had been washed clean. A small stool was placed on a rock, and a burly man with long hair hanging loosely over his shoulders, clad in a heavy armor of Qilin treading on the moon, and having a pair of double pupils in his eyes, was seen sitting upright on the stool, looking at the battlefield thousands of miles away with a bright gleam flickering in his eyes. Yingzheng. Yingzheng, the Emperor of Qin. The burly man rested both hands on his knees, looking like a fierce tiger sitting cross-legged on the top of a mountain. He was emanating a domineering aura that made people bow their heads and worship him. With a faint smile on his face, he looked at Yingzheng and said coolly, "Do you know that I've been waiting for the day to fight you for over 2,000 years? Your sons and grandsons are no match for me. Bring me the spear." The burly man reached out his hand and made a grabbing gesture. 6 burly bodyguards, tall and burly, their skin glinting with a faint golden gleam, carried up a coiling dragon spear, as thick as a bowl and measuring 24 feet long, and handed it over to the burly man. When the burly man held the pitch-black coiling dragon spear in his hand, a sharp and jarring dragon cry suddenly rang out from within the spear. "Activate the myriad corpses formation and kill all the generals and ministers of Qin army. The army of Yen has yet to arrive, and I'm too lazy to find out what kind of strategy they have in mind." An excited smile emerged on the burly man's face. He laughed wildly and said, "In the face of absolute power, all strategies are just like flowers in a mirror or the moon in the water, which can be easily broken. Only a power that can dominate the world can stir the clouds in all directions." Suddenly, the burly man sprung up into the sky and sat on the dark horse. He threw his head back and laughed wildly and said, "Too bad, you're not here with me. You won't be able to see me raise the spear and ride the horse once again, sweeping across all the so-called heroes and mighty figures under the heaven. Ug, oh Ug. Watch me kill Emperor Qin today." With a thrust of the spear, the burly man and his horse broke through the void and arrived behind Yingzheng in a blink of an eye. Before Yingzheng could kill Wu Qi and Lord Xiancheng, the coiling dragon spear of the burly man had already smashed brutally onto Yingzheng's back with a murderous intent that could destroy everything. Yingzheng roared furiously. The shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent rolled and rolled behind him, while a tremendous force was sent flying backward along with the Imperial Seal in his hand. The coiling dragon spear and the Imperial Seal collided, causing blood to spray out from both the burly man and Yingzheng's 7 apertures. Yingzheng cursed furiously as he was knocked flying 100 miles away by the spear. Meanwhile, the burly man was laughing wildly as he rode back quickly, trying to offset the tremendous force from Yingzheng's Imperial Seal. At the same time, he drew out the sword hanging on his waist and swung it forcefully towards Li Si's head, who was just inches away from him. Li Si cried out in alarm and retreated hastily. The edge of the sword brushed past his shoulder, cutting off a thick piece of flesh about the size of a palm. Countless sharp and unpleasant howls soared into the sky from the Great Dream Marsh, as several tens of thousands of armored soldiers, shrouded in a towering murderous aura and enshrouded in a dense mist, dashed out from the mud, leaving numerous afterimages behind as they charged towards the Qin army. All of a sudden, the entire city built by the Qin army sank into the ground. 18 gigantic figures, nearly 10,000 feet tall and shrouded in a towering murderous aura and chilly gusts of wind, slowly straightened their bodies from where the city had sunk into the ground. Shockingly, these giants had already emptied the foundation of the Qin army's city. Wu Qi scanned these armored soldiers with his divine will, then cried out in shock, "All of them are dead bodies. What are they? Zombies? Who is this guy? Upon hearing Wu Qi's cry, the burly man, who was riding on a dark horse and was about to charge towards Ying Zheng with his spear, could not help but throw his head back and let out a loud laugh. I am Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu. Ying Zheng, I am also the one who burned down your Apang palace and killed all the members of your imperial clan. Countless thunderbolts came crashing down from the sky. For a moment, the only thing that could be seen was the figure of Xiang Yu riding on the dark horse, throwing his head back and roaring furiously into the sky. Chapter 226. Xiang Yu. The Xiang Yu who was too ashamed to face the elders of River East, and killed himself in the middle of Wu River. Wu Qi could not help but breathe out a long sigh as he looked at the tall and mighty figure riding on the back of the dark horse, who was emanating a threatening murderous aura. A peerless hero was indeed an extraordinary man. After coughing out 2 mouthfuls of blood, Wu Qi pulled Lord Xiansheng and retreated backward. With his current strength, he did not have the qualification or ability to get himself involved in the affairs of these people. But sooner or later, Wu Qi would let these former heroes know that the world was a big place, and they were not the only ones. With a threatening flame burning in his eyes, Wu Qi carefully retreated backward. Without being told by anyone, Weining Dragon King had already coiled up a great wave and brought countless aquatic demon beasts to flee to the back. A great wave came rolling over and dragged Wu Qi and Lord Xiansheng into it. Weining Dragon King flew over and gave Lord Xiansheng a few slaps on the face and said, Bastard! You little rascal! Why did you try to save me? If something bad happened to you, who will take care of me when I die? Who will inherit the throne of Dragon King of Longyuan River? Lord Xiansheng's eyes went wide as he stared at Weining Dragon King and said in a deep voice, Wu Qi has restored my eyes, and that is a great kindness. If I don't repay the kindness, I am not a son of a man. Weining Dragon King gave him a few more slaps, causing Lord Xiansheng to flee with his hands over his head. While slapping him, he scolded, Son of a man, son of a man. You are a son of a man, my ass. Lao Tzu is a flood dragon, and so are you. What does it have to do with a man? If you dare to risk your life to save someone again, Lao Tzu will. After scolding him for a long while, Weining Dragon King still had no idea how to teach his son a lesson. So, in his mind, Wu Qi gave him a curse for his son, I'll fuck your mother. While laughing in his mind, a terrifying shockwave suddenly came from above his head. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, the waves were shattered into pieces by the tremendous force. Tens of thousands of gigantic fishes, turtles, water boas, and other spirit beasts exploded, turning into blood and flesh, drifting in the air above the waves. Everyone looked up hastily, and they saw Ying Zheng and Xiang Yu flying back while coughing blood once again. Obviously, Xiang Yu's physical strength was stronger than Ying Zheng, but Ying Zheng's magical power and divine abilities were much stronger than Xiang Yu. Both men fought head-on, sending tremendous forces crashing into each other. Ying Zheng's fleshly body was nearly disintegrated by Xiang Yu's brute force, while Xiang Yu's soul was apparently shaken by Ying Zheng's divine ability. He was shaking his head desperately, trying to regain his confused mind. This was the second time the two Overlord-class characters clashed head-on, and both of them were injured and forced to retreat. Both of their cultivation techniques were domineering and tyrannical. Once they clashed, they could only advance and not retreat. Therefore, the injuries they suffered were especially severe. Standing behind Ying Zheng, Li Si clenched his jaws tightly as he pulled out a scroll and a writing brush. Staring at Xiang Yu with his eyes, he wrote a huge character of death on the scroll. The character was written in the ancient script of birds and insects, and it was emanating an ominous dark mist. Li Si gently swung the tip of the writing brush, and the huge character of death immediately broke into pieces on the scroll. Then, he cried out in a low voice, Dharma word, death, quietus of all things. A dense dark mist burst out from every single pore on Li Si's body. Li Si's body suddenly shriveled up, and in a blink of an eye, he turned from a handsome middle-aged scholar into a withered, skinny old man. Xiang Yu, who was holding the coiling dragon spear in his hand, throwing his head back and laughing wildly into the sky, preparing to launch the third attack towards Xingzheng, suddenly trembled. The void around him, 1,000 feet in diameter, suddenly turned pitch black. Only a faint white gleam was emitting from his body, which allowed him to be seen clearly. It was as if the void had suddenly turned into the 18th level of hell. Countless twisting evil ghosts squeezed out from the pitch-black, circular space, baring their teeth and leaping towards Xiang Yu. Countless evil ghosts leaped out from the void, bringing with them an immense aura of death, and kept sucking the life force from Xiang Yu's body. Xiang Yu, who was once full of vigor, suddenly trembled, and together with the dark horse, he froze in midair. There were countless evil ghosts, and each of them had only sucked a tiny bit of life force from him. In just a blink of an eye, Xiang Yu's skin and muscles had shriveled up like a withered apple, and there was no more life force left in him. The dark horse threw its head back and let out a long and loud cry, while its muscles tightened up, and its dark and shiny fur quickly turned dull and lusterless. Li Si, who had a large piece of flesh cut off from his shoulder by Xiang Yu, was grinning grimly. Dark mists kept flashing and flashing around his body, as he closed his eyes and focused on maintaining the effect of the Dharma word with all his strength. Su Fu, clad in a thick black robe, his body shrouded in a strange gleam, and from time to time, twisting runes could be seen emerging and hovering around his body. He looked at Li Si, who was surrounded by the evil ghosts, then casually stretched out his finger and pointed it at the void. 8 million deities from the past and present, I'll crush them all with a single finger. All the realms in the universe, the past and the present, all the deities, listen to my command. Abruptly, the finger stretched out by Su Fu turned translucent, expanding to a length of over 3 feet, and as thick as an ordinary man's arm. Countless tiny runes could be vaguely seen on the tip of the finger. With a shake of his body, the surrounding natural energies kept fusing into the huge finger. In just a short moment, the void in front of his fingertips suddenly shattered. Su Fu's body pierced through the shattered void and came behind Xiang Yu. Noiselessly and gently, like a falling snowflake, his enlarged fingers slowly pressed onto Xiang Yu's back. Suddenly, a loud boom rang out between the heaven and the earth, turning several thousand lofty mountains down below into nothingness at the same time. A frightening howl was heard coming from the depths of Great Dream Marsh, while countless pitch-black silt and dirty water shot up into the sky, reaching a height of over 100 miles. Suddenly, the void around Xiang Yu shattered, while countless evil ghosts transformed into pitch-black and sticky mist, smashing into his body together with Su Fu's finger. Xiang Yu's body leaned forward, and was knocked flying off from the back of the horse. His armor was ripped to shreds, revealing his bronze-colored and incredibly strong fleshly body. His skin was torn and broken, and vaguely, countless twisting black runes could be seen drilling and weaving in his muscles. The soul-shattering curse had transformed countless evil ghosts and deities into the vicious power of quietus and injected them into Xiang Yu's body, turning them into cursed runes and stirring inside his body. Wu Qi, who had retreated several hundred miles away from the battlefield and had been observing the battlefield with the mystic eyes of universe, breathed out a deep sigh and said, "The soul-shattering curse from script of ancient law is indeed powerful. Too bad that I didn't have the time to study the Tao of primordial runes recently, so I don't have the ability to use this finger technique." Wu Qi knew very well that without the countless evil ghosts summoned by Li Si using the Dharma word, Su Fu's soul-shattering curse could not have such a powerful power. Only by joining hands with Li Si's Dharma word and Su Fu's soul-shattering curse could they have unleashed such a frightening power that shattered all the mountains within 10,000 miles. Mud rose high from the ground, and several thousand lofty mountains were crushed to pieces. Endless earth energy pervaded the surroundings. The hills crumbled, and the underground energy veins beneath them were severely damaged as well. Immeasurable amounts of earth energy leaked out, turning into natural energy storms that could be seen with naked eyes, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. With a solemn expression, Zhang Yi walked out from the hole. He spread both hands, and a frightening suction force suddenly came out from his body. Like a tiny black hole, he sucked in all the drifting energies around him in a blink of an eye. The enormous suction force spread out rapidly, and in just a blink of an eye, it had covered the entire sky region of 100,000 miles in circumference. Endless earth-core spiritual energy was absorbed into Zhang Yi's body, and then turned into a huge magnetic force that poured out of his body. This time, the enormous magnetic force was forcibly condensed into a dark hole that was less than several tens of feet in diameter. Amidst a loud rumbling of thunder, it teleported near Xiang Yu's body. Xiang Yu, whose armor was broken by Su Fu's soul-shattering curse, and his body was in a complete mess, plunged headlong into the black hole formed by the magnetic force. An enormous suction force that could shatter the stars came from all directions, grabbing his body like countless huge hands, trying to tear him into the tiniest pieces of meat. Xiang Yu's body twisted in a very bizarre manner. In the pitch-black hole, his body was like a toy made of plasticine, and in just a moment, he no longer looked like a human. Arrow, star-shattering. In the distance, Li Xian suddenly walked out from the crowd of Great Qin's ministers. He pulled open a strange-shaped longbow that was as tall as himself and released 3 arrows in a row. Dang, dang, dang. 3 blinding beams shot out from the bow, piercing through the black hole formed by the magnetic force and hitting Xiang Yu's body. No one knew how Xiang Yu's body was tempered, but when the 3 arrows that were powerful enough to pierce through a mountain hit him, they only broke his skin and could not penetrate into his flesh. After a series of rapid stabs, the exploding sword lights only caused a large amount of blood to spurt out, but did not cause any real harm to Xiang Yu. Ying Zheng, who was holding the imperial seal in his hand and getting ready to launch another attack at Xiang Yu, had his expression flickered. He cried out fiercely, "What a good fleshly body! Xiang Yu, you traitor, you should be proud of your cultivation base. But too bad, I have countless capable ministers and fierce generals by my side, and you are alone. How could you be my match?" A long cry rang out, as Wang Jian, Wang Ben, and Wang Li sprung up into the sky at the same time. In their left hand was a tricolored mirror that emitted a tricolored light that shone on Xiang Yu's body, while in their right hand were 3 identical swords that kept emanating a blinding light like 3 little suns and emanating frightening heat waves. Letting out long whistling noises, they thrust straight towards Xiang Yu's forehead, throat, and heart. The cultivation base of Wang Jian and the other 2 men was peak stage nascent soul realm, and they too were cultivating with body tempering techniques. Their fleshly bodies were very strong, and their magical powers and divine abilities were only suitable for close combat. When the 3 swords were thrust out at the same time, the power contained in them was enough to pierce through a mountain and split the ocean. Bringing with them a blinding light and a threatening heat wave, the 3 swords tore through the void and stabbed viciously into Xiang Yu's body. In almost 1/10 of a second, Qi and all the ministers of Daqin had struck out, unleashing a frightening attack that could even kill an ordinary nascent divinity cultivator. No matter it was cultivation techniques, divine abilities, magical treasures, or weapons, the overall strength and resources displayed by all the ministers of Daqin had shocked Wu Qi. The 3 swords had pierced through Xiang Yu's skin, and were about to pierce deep into his body. All of a sudden, Xiang Yu threw his head back and let out a wild laugh. "Ying Zheng. Why would I need the help of others to deal with this bunch of useless fools? I, Xiang Yu alone, can destroy you, Daqin, with just a flip of my palm. There is a god in Great Chu, who slaughters all living beings with an axe. His name is Qi Yu Shi, who overturns the heaven and earth." As Xiang Yu let out a long cry that sounded somewhat old and sad, a towering blood energy shot out from behind his back, and amidst it, a blood-red flag could be vaguely seen fluttering in the air. "Get the hell out of my way, you bunch of worms." Xiang Yu flipped his right palm and lifted it up into the air. A blood-red palm print expanded to the size of 100 miles, soaring up into the sky together with the roars of countless soldiers. Li Si's Dharma words, Su Fu's spell, Zhang Yi's magnetic force, and the sword beams from Wang Jian and his family were all shattered by the blood-red palm print. Su Fu, Wang Jian, and all the other men coughed up blood and flew away in all directions, with blood bursting out from their 7 apertures at the same time. The huge blood-red palm print brought with it a despairing aura and shot up to 100 miles into the sky, then came pressing down forcefully. On the ground, 18 giant undead warriors, each standing 10,000 feet tall, forcibly uprooted the city built by Qin army from the ground, lifting it up into the sky. When the blood-red palm print pressed down, the thick and heavy restrictive runes on the city were shattered, and several thousand Qin practitioners were turned into ashes by the blood-red palm print while howling miserably. With just one palm print, all the Qin army and ministers were defeated. Chapter 227. Then, 18 huge undead warriors threw the Qin city roughly 100 miles in circumference to the ground. A deafening boom rang out, and a tremendous shockwave shattered many barracks and houses in the city. At least 100,000 Qin soldiers hiding in the city suffered internal injuries caused by the tremendous shockwave, and fell to the ground while coughing blood. Then, several tens of thousands of undead warriors, clad in iron armors and shrouded in towering Yin energy, let out deep roars. Seizing the opportunity when the runes and restrictive spells above the city were shattered by Xiang Yu with a palm strike, they charged into the city at lightning speed. Like a torrent of death, several tens of thousands of undead warriors charged into the city, bringing with them a vast and boundless aura of death. Large groups of Qin soldiers lined up in neat formations, rushing out from various barracks in the city, fearlessly charging towards these undead warriors. Even those Qin soldiers, whose internal organs were injured by the tremendous shockwave just now, struggled to their feet and formed into battle formations, cooperating with their comrades as they charged towards the undead warriors who came charging at them. Two armies, emanating the same murderous aura, collided fiercely with each other like two great tsunamis. The shrill cries of countless middle and lower-ranked captains rang out from the ranks of the Qin army. Following the cries of these captains, three groups of soldiers at the forefront of the Qin army raised up large iron shields, each half a foot thick and nearly 10 feet tall, forming a thick and solid line of defense. The soldiers behind the shields clenched their blades tightly, and following the neat cries of the captains, they hacked and hacked forward with all their strength. Amidst loud clanging noises, the iron armors worn by the blades were shattered, and the sharp blades pierced through the armors and hacked into their bodies. However, it was unknown what mystic technique was used to temper these undead warriors, as their bodies were at least 10 times or even 100 times stronger than the iron armors worn by them, which served only as decoration rather than defense. When the blades landed on their bodies, they could only produce a large amount of sparks, and could not break their bodies at all. Behind the 3 rows of Qin soldiers in the front were 3 rows of warriors with spears in their hands. Following the orders given by their commanders, these warriors, who had arms that were obviously twice thicker than those warriors with huge shields and machetes, lowered their bodies and gripped tightly onto the sharp spears that were as thick as human arms. They roared deeply, then thrust their spears forward through the gaps that were purposely left on the shields. Another series of metallic clangs rang out, and the armor on the zombies' bodies shattered. The sharp spears pierced through the armor, but they only created a few insignificant white marks on the bodies of these terrifying zombie soldiers. The zombie soldiers nonchalantly grabbed the spears and machetes, and swung them in all directions with all their strength. Cries of alarm rang out one after another, as several thousand Qin soldiers had their blades and spears grabbed by the zombies. They were dragged out from the ranks by these zombies, who seemed to have an infinite strength, and were thrown out forcefully. Even the weakest of these Qin soldiers had the cultivation base of peak stage Hotian realm. However, their strength still belonged to the category of human beings. Even those Qin soldiers of Xiantian realm, even though they had cultivated their bodies to the level of Xiantian body strengthening realm, their arms could only carry a strength of several thousand kilograms. However, these zombies were cultivated with a mystic technique, and when they were alive, their cultivation base was not weaker than the Qin soldiers. After they died, they were tempered with herbs and mystic techniques, which made their fleshly bodies 10 times, or even 100 times harder than steel, and their strength was at least 100 times stronger than ordinary soldiers. With just a casual swing of these zombies, they could carry a tremendous force of no less than 100,000 kilograms. With just a swing, these Qin soldiers were thrown several hundred feet away. Underneath these Qin soldiers were swarms of zombies, who were swarming forward. Right when these soldiers landed on the ground, they were immediately grabbed by the huge hands of the zombies that came from all directions. With a casual pull from these ferocious zombies, who only had a tiny bit of killing instinct left in them, several thousand Qin soldiers were ripped apart, their blood and internal organs splattering all over the ground. A wild howl rang out, as the tens of thousands of zombies, who were charging at the forefront, thrust their fists forward with all their strength. Their fists smashed viciously onto the thick and heavy shields of the Qin soldiers. The brute force of each punch had the force of several 100,000 kilograms, shattering all the shields of the Qin soldiers. The Qin soldiers holding the shields were like eggs that had been smashed by a mountain-splitting hammer. Their bodies could not withstand the tremendous force, and their bones were broken, shooting out from their bodies like arrows shot from a powerful crossbow, ripping their own bodies into a bloody mess. In just the time of one breath, the shield formation at the forefront of the Qin soldiers had completely collapsed, and all the shield bearers were slaughtered by the zombies. Tens of thousands of zombies swarmed into the city, lining up in a straight line and pushing forward in an unstoppable manner like a crumbling mountain ridge. The 3 rows of spear bearers behind the shield bearers did not even have the time to pull back their spears, and the zombies had already arrived before them. The heavy fists were like the thunder hammer smashed down by the god of thunder, exploding the bodies of these spear bearers into pieces. Blood and minced meat were piled up all over the ground, and it was a scene that was too horrible to look at. In just a few breaths of time, over 30,000 Qin soldiers had been killed. All the soldiers were killed, and not a single one of them was wounded. In the face of these ferocious zombies, it was impossible to leave any wounded soldiers alive. Nevertheless, the formation of Qin army did not fall into disorder. All the soldiers were holding their positions tightly, holding weapons in their hands and staring furiously at the zombies that kept pushing forward. Crossbows. Suddenly, the roars of the Qin generals rang out from all directions. As their roars echoed out, a large group of crossbowmen, clad in leather armors and holding strangely shaped crossbows, suddenly rushed out from the back of the formation. Using the fastest speed, these Qin crossbowmen loaded their crossbows, roughly calculating the distance between them and the army of zombies. Then, they tilted the crossbows slightly towards the sky and quickly unleashed a projectile attack. Buzz! The crossbow formation of Qin army was activated. Tens of thousands of bolts soared into the sky like a swarm of wasps, tearing through the air with deep, muffled whistling noises as they flew straight towards the army of zombies. In midair, Xiang Yu, who had just repelled a few generals and important ministers of Qin army with one palm strike, suddenly let out a wild laugh and said, "Ingzheng, how could these scrap metals be able to defeat the divine undead soldiers of Great Chu?" Over the past several hundred years, relying on these several tens of thousands of divine undead soldiers, I've been marching all the way to the north, wiping out countless demons, devils and evil creatures. Not a single soldier was killed or wounded. Do you really think these scrap metals can hurt them? Xiang Yu threw his head back and laughed, showing his disdain towards Daqin's bolts. But, after laughing for 2.5 times, he could not laugh anymore. The rest of his wild laughter was choked in his throat, turning into a clucking sound that only an old hen could make when laying eggs. It made him look extremely embarrassed. Amidst Xiang Yu's wild laughter, the countless bolts of Qin army had fallen into the army of zombies. All the bolts burst out with a blinding white light at the same time, which came with a magical purifying and exorcising power. Under the blanketing of the white light, the divine undead soldiers under Xiang Yu's command began to melt like snowmen under the sunlight. A large amount of dark mist kept rushing out from their bodies, softening their bodies that were stronger than steel. The bolts did not cause too many direct casualties to these divine undead soldiers, but the magical white light had greatly weakened the strength of these zombies. To the surprise of the Qin soldiers, they realized that their blades could easily hack off the heads of these zombies, and their spears could easily pierce through the vital parts of these zombies. The movement of these zombies became slow and stiff, and under the illumination of the white light, no matter it was their strength, morale, or the speed of healing, all of them had doubled. Su Fu, who was knocked flying away by Xiang Yu's palm strike and nearly had all his bones broken by the blood-red palm print, let out a wild laugh while coughing blood. Xiang Yu, you little punk. Don't you dare look down on me, Daqin. If not because the ambush I, Daqin, set up was to target someone else, and if not because we did not expect that you would come and disturb our plans, how could you be so arrogant? You are just some undead zombies. What kind of amazing cultivation technique is that? The mystic technique of me, Daqin, is not weaker than yours. A loud roar echoed out, shaking the surrounding mountains and making them shake violently, while huge waves rose and rocked the Great Dream Marsh. Muffled footsteps could be heard coming from the city where Qin army was stationed. Hundreds of thousands of steel puppets walked out slowly from various barracks in the city, with heavy steps, their bodies glinting with dazzling runes. Each of these steel puppets stood about 12 feet tall, much taller than an ordinary man. They were holding sharp blades and spears in their hands, as well as terrifyingly huge metal bows and crossbows. Striding in an orderly manner, they formed the most common charging formation used by the Qin army, and greeted the undead soldiers who were shrouded in the white light. Amidst the shouts of the Qin generals, the Qin soldiers retreated slowly. These gigantic demon figurines replaced the Qin soldiers and engaged in a fierce battle with the undead soldiers. Tragedy struck. The undead soldiers, whose combat strength was weakened by 90% by the white light, were no match for these demon figurines. From the murderers who massacred wantonly a moment ago, they had now become the targets that were being slaughtered wantonly. These demon figurines were forged using precious alloys that had been tempered hundreds of times, and the runes on their bodies had given them a tremendous defense and strength. Each demon figurine weighed about 50,000 kilograms, and even the undead soldiers at their peak condition would find it difficult to knock these demon figurines down with ease. Every strike of these demon figurines carried a force of over 1 million kilograms, which was comparable to the tremendous strength that only peak-stage human immortals of Jin Dan who specialized in body tempering could have. Boosted by such a tremendous force, the blades and spears in their hands had unleashed a frightening lethality that could make one feel despair. When a 30-feet-long blade was swung horizontally, a dozen undead soldiers would be cut into two from the waist, and when a spear as thick as a small tree trunk was thrust gently, 3 to 5 undead soldiers would be smashed to pieces. On the other hand, when the undead soldiers' fists landed on these demon figurines, they could only produce a large amount of sparks. Their nails could not even leave a scratch on these demon figurines. The strength of each demon figurine's metal body was comparable to upper-grade magical items, and together with the defensive strength boosted by the primordial runes, their bodies were as strong as lower-grade magical treasures. Wu Qi ran his mystic eyes of universe through this batch of demon figurines. There were a total of 150,000 demon figurines. On the battlefield, these demon figurines could unleash a frightening combative strength that could fight 10,000 ordinary soldiers alone. When placed before this army of demon figurines, the Blood Swallow Army and Black Swallow Army, who were the most elite armies of Great Yan Dynasty, were just like the Divine Undead Army, a target to be slaughtered. Wu Qi could not help but gasp. Fortunately, Xiang Yu, a good Samaritan who took pleasure in helping others, had attacked Yingjing first. Otherwise, Great Yan Dynasty might have suffered a great loss. But, where did these demon figurines come from? When the Qin army was besieged by the aquatic demons of Longyuan River, they had never seen these fearsome weapons. The aquatic demons of Longyuan River had retreated back to the Spirit Tapeworm River, and were retreating along the river towards the main river course. Wu Qi, He Qianqiu, Wanying Dragon King, and a few other men were standing on the top of the tallest mountain near the Spirit Tapeworm River, exercising their mystic arts and watching the battle between the Qin army and Xiang Yu. Judging from the current situation, there was no doubt that Xiang Yu was at a disadvantage. Although he had defeated the siege of Daqin's ministers with a single palm strike, his divine undead army was in danger of being destroyed. Right at this moment, the 18 giant undead warriors brought here by Xiang Yu suddenly opened their mouths together. Large sheets of crimson flame burst out from the mouths of these 10,000 feet tall giant undead warriors, blanketing the divine undead army and Daqin demon figurines who were fighting fiercely. A threatening heat swept across the entire place. Even Wu Qi and his company, who were standing several hundred miles away, could feel the frightening heat wave coming at them. It showed how frightening the heat contained in these flames was. On the spot, those collapsed mountains near the city were melted into lava, while all the Qin soldiers in the city were turned into ashes and drifting in the air due to the high temperature. Hundreds of thousands of Qin soldiers were killed on the spot. Chapter 228. Roar, roar, roar. Amidst the raging flame that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth, the divine undead soldiers, who were left with only slightly over 20,000 steel demon figurines, were roaring excitedly. Their bodies, which had been weakened by the white light attached to the Qin army's crossbows, were quickly recovering. They were desperately absorbing the heat contained in the flame, as well as some magical energy. Their bodies were glowing with a unique luster that could only be found in steel. No matter it was the toughness of their bodies or their strength, they had reached a whole new realm. Loud clanging noises kept ringing out, as the divine undead soldiers, who had regained their strength, kept swinging their fists and smashing them towards the steel demon figurines in front of them. The loud clanging noises could be heard from several hundred miles away, and Wu Qi and the others could hear them clearly. On the sturdy bodies of the steel demon figurines, there were numerous shallow fist marks, as they were pushed back by these divine undead soldiers who had suddenly unleashed a tremendous force. The crimson flame had even burned the runes around these steel demon figurines, causing them to explode one after another. The defensive strength of their bodies dropped rapidly, and in just a blink of an eye, they were left with only the defensive strength of their steel bodies. The raging flame that came pouring down like raging waves from the ocean had turned these steel demon figurines' bodies red. Some demon figurines that were made with slightly flawed materials had even melted into molten iron, just like the surrounding ground. As their bodies were softened by the heat, no matter it was their movement speed, defensive strength, or physical strength, all of them had dropped significantly. The fists of the divine undead soldiers smashed forcefully on these demon figurines' bodies, leaving one deep dent after another on their bodies. Very soon, some demon figurines had their vital parts wounded by the fists of the divine undead soldiers, and gradually lost their ability to move. The 18 giant undead soldiers were still spewing out flames, and at the same time, they began to move their bodies, forming a mysterious formation that looked simple, but actually contained a profound principle. It was a formation that could faintly control the flow of natural energies in the surroundings. Flames kept bursting out from their mouths, completely burning everything in the Qin city. The ashes of several 100,000 Qin soldiers sank into the magma on the ground and disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh and said, "The Qin army has received reinforcements from their homeland. Last time, when we forced the Qin army to retreat, they only retreated with a few 100,000 soldiers. But today, the number of Qin army soldiers who surrounded Imperial Advisor he numbered over 200,000, and in the end, they were all devoured by Spirit Tapeworm King's children." The Spirit Tapeworm King, who had a long and slender body and had coiled several hundred rounds around the mountaintop, chuckled and nodded his head, indicating that his children were very satisfied with the meal. Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "After that, the number of Qin soldiers who charged out from the city just now was no less than 300,000, and they were all burned to a crisp by these big fellows. The total number of soldiers who were killed was at least 500,000, and all of them were elite soldiers of the Blood Swallow Army and Black Swallow Army. Qin, they must have received reinforcements from the mainland. Otherwise, how could they have expended so many soldiers?" Since it was none of his business, Waiting Dragon King stuck his chest out and said indifferently, "No matter how many soldiers he brings, I'm not afraid of him. If worst comes to worst, I'll just close the front door of Dragon King Mansion and let them stomp on the shore." He grinned complacently, then continued with a strange voice, "In the ancient times, the lineage of Dragon King Mansion in Longyuan River had produced 2 ancestors of the true dragons. The restrictive spells they left behind can only be broken by heaven immortals. Old dragon, close the front door and don't care about the bloody storm outside." He patted on Wuqi's shoulder forcefully, then said kindly, "Young lad, if Great Yen can't hold on any longer and is about to be wiped out, you can come and hide in my place. Let me tell you something first. You can bring some men with you, but not too many. The Dragon King Mansion is only a small place, and it can only accommodate around 1,000 to 800 people at most." Wuqi rolled his eyes and thanked Waining Dragon King. Although this old dragon was a cunning old man, he had a good character. With his promise, even if Wuqi's secret palace was breached by someone in the future, he would still have a way out, wouldn't he? While the group was chatting and laughing, a few bright beams suddenly flew over from the mountains behind them, and without drawing any attention, they came next to Wuqi and his company. When the bright beams faded, Yan Dan and his company appeared next to Wuqi. None of the newcomers said anything, just frowning and staring at the battle taking place on the Great Dream Marsh in the distance. Especially Su Qin, his face was even more serious, as if everyone owed him a debt of tens of millions of taels of gold. After a long while, Su Qin clenched his teeth and cursed, "Who is that kid with the bare buttocks? I've been planning for a long time, all for the sake of deciding the winner and the loser, but in the end, my plan was ruined by him. Bastard, bastard. If he was not fighting with Ing Zheng, I would have killed him with the starlight technique." Ugh, Wuqi gave Su Qin a look and said carefully, "This man calls himself Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu. I have no idea where he comes from. But with his cultivation base, he is able to fight with Ing Zheng face to face. All the Qin ministers were defeated by him with a single palm strike, and the city of Qin army was conquered by his divine undead army. Those 18 over 10,000 feet tall monsters were also brought here by him. I have no idea where he comes from." Yan Dan, Su Qin, and the others, as well as Chi-Chi, exclaimed softly, "Xiang Yu? It's him. Interesting." Wuqi bowed his head and did not say another word. Apparently, they all knew who this Xiang Yu was. With a complicated expression, Su Qin nodded his head and said, "Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, this man. Good, very good. All the heroes under the heaven, Su Qin, would like to fight with you one by one." Ha, 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 ha. Su Qin let out a few long and loud laughs. Suddenly, a blush emerged on his wrinkled face, as if he had suddenly become several dozens of years younger. On the other hand, Yan Dan, Jing Ku, and a few other men stuck out their chests, and an indescribable aura burst out from their bodies. It was like a great river, surging and rocking violently, causing Wuqi's blood to boil. It was as if there was a lofty sentiment accumulating in his chest, and was about to make him let out a long and loud roar that shook the sky. Wuqi was taken aback. Hastily, he controlled the 7 holy deities and devils, forcibly suppressing the lofty sentiment and lofty aspiration. Among all the heroes under the heaven, if any of them wanted to fight to the death, it would have nothing to do with Wuqi. For the time being, Wuqi did not have the overall strength to participate in the battle, so he wisely chose to be a bystander. Following behind Yan Dan was Huowu, the bald-tailed owl. He did not pay any attention to the lofty sentiment that suddenly burst out from Yan Dan, Su Qin, and the others. The old demon king just curiously looked at Lord Xiansheng, and was surprised to see that his eyeball had returned to its original state. Sensing Huowu's surprised look, both Lord Xiansheng and Waining Dragon King turned their heads over at the same time, giving him a fierce glare. If not for the fact that Xiang Yu and Ing Zheng were fighting right in front of them, as well as Yan Dan and the others, perhaps both father and son would have already challenged Huowu, inviting him to find a clean corner and have a fight to the death. Although they did not challenge him, both father and son kept throwing hostile glances at Huowu's vital parts. Looking at their expressions, anyone could easily understand what they were thinking. Huowu laughed coldly, and did not pay any attention to Waining Dragon King and his son. Instead, he turned his head and looked in the direction of Great Dream Marsh. There, the climax of the battle had once again begun. The blood-red light behind Xiang Yu's back gradually spread and spread out, while the blood-red flag gradually expanded to about 100 miles in circumference. It hovered and fluttered behind Xiang Yu's back, constantly drawing the natural energies from the surroundings and turning them into a sheet of blinding blood-red light. An immense murderous aura kept drifting out from the flag, while deafening battle cries kept ringing out, causing the surrounding heaven and earth to shake violently. Tens of thousands of tiny blood threads stretched out from the flag and kept injecting into Xiang Yu's body. The ripples of energy in his body grew stronger and stronger, to the point that even Wu Qi, who was standing several hundred miles away from him, felt a suffocation in his chest, making him unable to breathe. Tens of thousands of warriors with pale golden skin came running from afar, gathering behind Xiang Yu's back. They were clad in heavy bronze armors, and were driving bronze chariots with simple and unadorned designs. Each chariot was pulled by 4 single-horned rhinoceroses. There were a total of 20,000 bronze chariots, and on each chariot were 4 fully armored warriors. One was driving, one was holding a blade, one was holding a spear, and the last one was holding a bow. The wheels of the chariot were densely covered with sharp blades and teeth. Wisps of smoke were coiling around the wheels, allowing the heavy chariots to fly in the sky. Carefully, Wu Qi's divine will transformed into a thin line and stretched to several hundred miles away, giving those warriors a glance. The cultivation technique practiced by these warriors was very strange, completely different from the orthodox cultivation technique practiced by qi cultivators. There was also an enormous amount of energy circulating in their bodies, but they did not form Jin Dan. Instead, all the energies were spread throughout their bodies, making their bodies extremely strong. According to their overall strength, there were 12, 24, 36, 48, and up to 360 acupoints in their bodies, with powerful energy whirlpools spinning ceaselessly in them. Several dozens of warriors, who had successfully formed energy whirlpools in 360 acupoints in their bodies, were emanating an aura that was not much weaker than that of peak-stage nascent soul cultivators like Li Si. There were also a few generals among them. Their helmets were adorned with 2 unique blood-red bull horns, which made them different from the rest of the warriors. The energy whirlpools in all 360 acupoints of these generals had formed tiny energy crystals that looked like Jin Dan. An enormous amount of energy was surging and rocking in their bodies. Surprisingly, it gave Wu Qi the same feeling as Hu Wuyu, Xiong Wanling, and the other demon kings of nascent divinity realm. Of course, these generals were not as strong as old demon kings like Xiong Wanling, but the level of their energies was definitely at the realm of nascent divinity. As for those black-armored single-horned rhinoceroses, each of them had formed their demon cores, and all of them were demon immortals. Wu Qi's heart was cramping. 80,000 black-armored single-horned rhinoceroses were pulling each other, 80,000 rhinoceroses who had formed their demon cores. With his mouth twitching, he turned to look at Yen Dan and murmured, "Does Great Yen Dynasty really have 80,000 Jin Dan human immortals?" Slowly, Yen Dan opened his mouth and murmured to himself, "I suppose they have the hidden strength of all the vassal kingdoms." The faces of Xiong Wanling and the other demon kings had turned extremely unsightly as well. 80,000 black-armored single-horned rhinoceroses who were at the realm of demon immortals made their faces unsightly. Apart from the great shock in their hearts, a wild and greedy gleam could be seen in their eyes. These 80,000 black-armored single-horned rhinoceroses belonged to the demon race. If they could subdue these rhinoceroses, their overall strength would be greatly improved. Inside the city of Qin Army, 18 giant undead warriors had unleashed their might, burning the steel demon figurines of Qin Army into a complete rout. Of the 150,000 steel demon figurines, over 20,000 were burned into molten iron, and over 40,000 were smashed into scrap metal by the divine undead warriors. Only over 80,000 steel demon figurines suddenly sprung up into the sky, fleeing from the area that was engulfed by the raging flame in a flurry, fleeing behind Ing Zheng and the others. Xiang Yu threw his head back and laughed wildly. Pointing his finger at Ing Zheng, he roared, "Ing Zheng, the military strength of your Daqin dynasty is just so. My boys, who can travel unhindered under the heaven and be invincible?" Behind Xiang Yu, the 80,000 soldiers, Chi-Chi, raised their weapons and roared, "Xiang Yu, am invincible under the heaven. I, Xiang Yu, am invincible under the heaven." Naked, Xiang Yu called back his dark horse, leaped onto its back, raised his coiling dragon spear and pointed it at Ying Zheng. "My boys, follow me and kill." Thunderous claps of hooves echoed out. Enveloped by the blood-red war banner, the mighty army of Xiang Yu was emanating a murderous aura that could destroy everything as they charged towards Ying Zheng and his men. Looking at the approaching mighty army of Xiang Yu, Ying Zheng waved his hand casually, then drove the chariot and began to retreat. With one chasing and the other fleeing, the two armies quickly fled several thousand miles away. Chapter 229. Leading all the ministers of Great Qin and over 80,000 demon figurines that were badly burned, Ying Zheng was fleeing in the front. Apart from a group of ministers, some imperial servants, and some practitioners, there was no one else around Ying Zheng. Nevertheless, the over 80,000 tall and mighty steel demon figurines also looked mighty and mighty. Therefore, the army of Daqin still had a strong deterrent force. However, the mighty army of Xiang clan that was chasing closely behind Ying Zheng was not just a deterrent force, but a group of gods of slaughter. Wherever they went, all living beings would be wiped out. The blood-red war flag was fluttering above the mighty army of Xiang clan, emanating a very strong blood aura. The army of Xiang clan flew across the mountains and forests. All the birds, beasts, flowers, insects, and fishes had their spirit, energy, and vitality sucked away by the strong blood aura emanating from the flag, turning them into surging energies that were injected into the bodies of Xiang Yu and the 80,000 Xiang clan soldiers. The chase continued for nearly 10,000 miles. The fighting spirit and killing intent emanating from the bodies of the mighty army of Xiang clan was at least 30% stronger than before. It was especially true for Xiang Yu, the owner of the blood-red war flag. 80% of the energy absorbed by the flag had been fused into his body, making the bodies of Xiang Yu and the dark horse he was riding on expand by a few times. Their bodies were shrouded in a very strong murderous aura, and the ripples emanating from them were actually catching up to Wanying Dragon King, an expert of peak-stage nascent divinity realm. Wu Qi and his company, who were following closely behind the two armies, could not help but exclaim in admiration when they saw the mountains and forests that had all their spirit, energy, and vitality sucked away, as well as those dead living beings. Xiang Yu's evil technique was extremely frightening, and that blood-red war flag of his was even more domineering and unreasonable. Because of the 18 enormous undead army of over 20,000 divine undead soldiers, these undead army followed closely behind the mighty army of Xiang clan and chased after Daqin's army. However, their flying speed was not very fast, and they were gradually getting further away from the army. Wu Qi and his company could only follow behind these undead army. They dared not to increase their speed to get a better look, fearing that there was something strange about these undead army, and if they were entangled by them, it would be a big trouble. After chasing for close to 5,000 kilometers, a large mountain ridge suddenly appeared in front of them that pierced the heavens like a sharp sword. This mountain range stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Every mountain was rugged and unyielding, rising straight up from the ground like blades, spears, swords, and halberds. There were no streams or rivers between the mountain ridges. There were no flowers or trees on the mountain ridges, not even a bit of moss. All the mountain ridges were pitch black like steel, emitting a trace of cold air that made people feel uneasy. Leading the army, Ying Zheng plunged headlong into the mountain ridges, traveling at top speed between the ridges. Xiang Yu, who was chasing after Ying Zheng's army with his army, suddenly pulled the reins and laughed coldly. Suddenly, the mighty army of Xiang clan halted their pursuit, and burst into loud laughter as well. Xiang Yu retracted the blood-red light behind his back, and the blood-red war flag had vanished as well. Holding the coiling dragon spear in his hand, he slowly knocked the golden ornament on the saddle of his dark horse, then cried out loudly, "Ying Zheng, little punk, is this all you've got? Luring the enemy deep into the enemy's territory? If it were in the past, I would definitely fall into your trap. But now, do you think Xiang Yu is an idiot who will follow you into this perilous land?" Several hundred miles behind them, Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe and gave the mountain ridges a glance. The appearance of the mountain ridges changed abruptly. In Wu Qi's eyes, all the mountain ridges had turned pale black and translucent. Amidst these ferocious-looking, rugged mountains, one could see countless runes and restrictive spells densely covering the several tens of thousands of miles in circumference. From the top of the mountains all the way to the energy veins several hundred miles deep under the ground, all these runes and restrictive spells had formed into a huge network of restrictive spells. This network of restrictive spells was extremely exquisite. Although the power of these runes and restrictive spells did not go beyond the scope of the script of ancient law, in terms of the technique of using them, they had reached the highest limit that the script of ancient law could achieve. The person who constructed this network of restrictive spells had a mastery and understanding of formations, restrictive spells, and runes at least 10 times better than Su Fu. Although Wu Qi had obtained the Book of Ancient God from Scroll of Stealing, and the script of ancient law that Su Fu always carried with him, he had only cultivated for a short period of time. Therefore, his understanding of primordial runes was not even as good as Su Fu. When facing this peerlessly exquisite restriction formation that possessed a grand and vast imposing aura, he could only sigh with admiration, and he exclaimed endlessly with admiration towards that person's extravagance and terrifying cultivation. If Wu Qi were to accidentally step into this restrictive spell formation, he could only barely save his own life, and it would be extremely difficult for him to break out from it. The person who had arranged this restriction hadn't left any loopholes or backdoors for Wu Qi to use. All the restriction runes had been condensed into an organic whole, without the slightest flaw. It was a perfect formation, at least within the scope of the Tao of primordial runes recorded in the script of ancient law, it was a perfect formation. Either I'm strong enough to split apart the mountain ridges and space for tens of thousands of kilometers with a single punch, or I'll be able to destroy the mountain ridges and space itself. Either my attainments in the primordial talisman Tao is more profound than the person who set up the formation, and I can break open a door for me to enter and exit, or else I'll definitely die once I fall in. Wu Qi looked at the mountain range with a pale face and took a deep breath. Wu Qi, who was shocked by the formation, suddenly understood the importance of these two things. In front of the person who constructed this formation, the pride and complacency that Wu Qi had once had vanished into thin air. A cold current was roaring and roaring in his mind. He kept reminding himself, there are countless almighty experts under the heaven, and countless strange and extraordinary people. Even though I have the Scroll of Stealing, it's only because my starting point is slightly higher than them. When faced with an absolute power, I still have to tuck my tail between my legs. If this person was in Ji City, if this person was the one who constructed the restrictive spell formation in Yan Xianchen and Yu Yi's mansion, Wu Qi would have long been captured alive. Cold sweat kept breaking out from his body. Wu Qi felt lucky that this person was in Daqin, and this person was one of Daqin's men, and not in Great Yan. Yan Dan and all the others were frowning as they looked at the mountain range in front of them, and they all found something not right. Ying Zheng, who had already fled 100 miles into the mountain range, led all his ministers and reorganized the over 80,000 steel demon figurines into an array. Then, they laid out a great formation on a flat land that measured several tens of miles in circumference between the mountain ridges. Standing on the chariot, Ying Zheng laughed and shouted at Xiang Yu, "You little thief, is that all you have? I have laid an ambush of over 10 million soldiers here, with the intention of dealing with Yan Dan. But, since you have jumped out of the trap, I might as well kill you." "Why not?" Riding on the dark horse, Xiang Yu glanced up and down at the mountain range in front of him. Then, from over 100 miles away, he shouted at Ying Zheng, "Do you think Xiang Yu is still the same boorish fellow? I know this is a trap, so why would I fall into it? Ying Zheng, if you are a man, come out and have a fair and square fight with Xiang Yu. Don't bring out those ambushes and formations to embarrass yourself." Raising his head up coldly and proudly, Xiang Yu sighed deeply and said, "These tricks are useless against Xiang Yu." Holding the sword of Qin Emperor with both hands, Ying Zheng looked at Xiang Yu and said, "Are they really useless?" "Not necessarily. Xiang Yu, oh Xiang Yu, you have destroyed the dynasty of Daqin in the past, and today, you have ruined my great plan. If I don't teach you a lesson, how could I face the 500,000 condemned prisoners of Daqin who were killed by you just now? Xiang Yu was stunned, Wu Qi was stunned, and so was Yan Dan. What condemned prisoners? Xiang Yu roared furiously. They are the soldiers who were killed by my divine undead army. They are all. Ying Zheng sneered proudly and said, in order to deal with Yan Dan, they are the 500,000 condemned prisoners who were transferred here from Daqin. They have taken the heart-obliterating pill, and their minds are wiped out, so they only know how to fight with their lives on the line. They have also taken the dragon saliva soul-burning pill, which concentrates all the blood essence in their body and explodes within a few days. With that, even an ordinary burly man can unleash a combative strength close to that of a Xiantian warrior. Ying Zheng sighed, shook his head and said, initially, 500,000 heart-obliterating pills and dragon saliva soul-burning pills were used as bait to ambush and kill Yan Dan. But little did I expect that the one who swallowed the bait is you, the traitor. Ying Zheng twitched his lips, drove the chariot and rose slowly into the sky. He shook his head and said, but, it's fine, fine. Since I can't kill Yan Dan, I can kill you, and that will be a great pleasure. At the rear of Ying Zheng's army, on the peak of a lofty mountain, about 10,000 miles away from the formation of Qin army, an altar rose out of thin air. An old man clad in a black robe, with an ancient and unsophisticated face and an air of elegance that made him look like an immortal, was seen standing slowly on the altar with a roll of bamboo slips in his hand. As he moved his feet, the mountain ridges tens of thousands of miles in circumference began to move as if they were alive. With this mountain ridges as the center, the underground energy veins within 100,000 miles in circumference transformed into flood dragons. Chi-Chi let out a loud dragon roar that towered into the sky, causing the natural energies to surge and make the surrounding void flicker and flicker. Xiang Yu and the over 80,000 mighty soldiers of Xiang Yu, who were still about 100 miles away from this mountain ridges, suddenly felt their bodies become light, as the surrounding void had transformed into a huge dimensional bubble, pulling them into the depth of the mountain ridges. Standing on the chariot, Ying Zheng let out a loud laugh and said, ignorant little boy, do you really think my formation can't do anything to you just because you refuse to enter my formation? Suddenly, deep, muffled battle cries soared into the sky like thunderclaps. Amidst the craggy, ferocious mountain ridges, on top of several tens of thousands of mountains of different sizes, several dozens, and even several hundreds of Qin soldiers emerged from the top of each mountain. They were armed with blades, spears, swords, and halberds, and each had a formation flag mounted on their back. These soldiers cried out at the same time. A strong aura of battlefield and slaughter towered into the sky, immediately bringing with it an innate murderous aura that filled this mountain ridges. The sky darkened, as countless dark clouds gathered from all directions. Heavy thunderclouds enveloped the entire mountain ridges, while huge thunderbolts kept striking down from the sky. The thunderbolts and electric webs had enveloped this deadly formation that was constructed using the terrain of the mountain ridges, trapping Xiang Yu, his mighty soldiers of Xiang Yu, and his divine undead weapons within it. Endless natural energies from underground energy veins were drawn into these mountain ridges by the restrictive spell, transforming into huge blades and swords that towered between the sky and the earth, slashing down viciously along with the thunderbolts. Every blade and every sword seemed to be able to tear the heaven and earth apart, and slaughter all living beings under the heaven and earth. From afar, Su Qin looked at the old man who was circulating his energy on the altar, and his body began to tremble violently. Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, is destined to fall in this place. I can't believe it's teacher who is constructing this formation himself. Suddenly, Su Qin roared at the top of his voice, how could Ying Zheng, the emperor of Qin, ask teacher to help him personally? How could teacher help the emperor of Qin? Bastard Zhang Yi, I'll fuck your mother. Then, Su Qin cursed, you rascal who gives birth to a child with 18 buttocks. Why don't you tell me that teacher is actually in the territory of Daqin? And that he is working for Ying Zheng? How is this even possible? Wanying Dragon King, Xiong Wanling, He Qianqiu, and all the other demon kings had no idea who Su Qin's teacher was, and they did not take that old man seriously at all. However, Yen Dan, Jing Ku, and all the other demon kings were so frightened that they screamed out loud. Cold sweat was breaking out from all over Wu Qi's body. No wonder this restrictive formation had reached the perfect state of being a part of nature itself. The person who constructed this formation was Su Qin, Zhang Yi's teacher, the legendary man, Gigu Zi. Chapter 230. Amidst the countless battle cries, a towering blood-red light burst out from Xiang Yu's back once again. The blood-red war flag was fluttering in the air, unleashing a vast blood-red light that completely enveloped the 80,000 mighty soldiers and over 20,000 divine undead soldiers behind him. Huge beams of blades and sword energies kept shooting out from the surrounding mountain ridges, hacking and slashing down with tremendous power. But they could only cause large ripples on the blood-red light, and could not hurt even a single soldier behind Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu threw his head back and roared with laughter, "Ingzheng, this formation of yours is quite a marvelous one. My army is 100 miles away from the formation, but they are still forcibly sucked into it. But too bad, I am protected by the banner of Qiyu left behind by the ancient celestial fiend Qiyu. No matter how murderous your blades, spears, swords, halberds are, they can only increase the power of the banner of Qiyu. What can you do to me?" Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the huge beams of blades and sword energies shot out from the tens of thousands of mountain ridges, which could easily kill an ordinary earth immortal of nascent soul realm, were immediately absorbed by the blood-red war flag. None of the murderous energies could hurt the banner of Qiyu. Instead, they could transform all the murderous energies into the power of the banner of Qiyu. The more powerful the beams of blades and sword energies were, the more ferocious the banner of Qiyu became. As Xiang Yu's life was directly connected with the banner of Qiyu, the ripples of energy emanating from his body became even more unstoppable. When the beams of blades and sword energies shot out from the tens of thousands of mountain ridges and smashed onto the banner of Qiyu, and were all absorbed by it, the murderous energy bursting out from Xiang Yu's body had nearly condensed into a solid form. With a hideous smile on his face, Xiang Yu casually grabbed towards a nearby mountain peak. Immediately, the dozens of elite Qin soldiers guarding on the mountain peak cried out in shock. The weapons in their hands, the armors they wore, everything that carried the murderous aura of the battlefield was no longer under their control, as everything was under Xiang Yu's control with his mind. The dozens of Qin soldiers were sent flying up into the sky, screaming as they were sucked into the blood-red light that shot out from the banner of Qiyu. Xiang Yu casually thrust his spear forward, and the coiling dragon spear shook the Qin soldiers, turning their bones and flesh into blood that sprayed and sprayed all over the sky, before being absorbed by the banner of Qiyu. Xiang Yu casually pushed his left palm forward, and the dozens of blades, spears, swords and halberds in the hands of the Qin soldiers flew out, shooting towards the Qin soldiers guarding on another mountain peak. Shrill howls rang out again. Dozens of Qin soldiers had their bodies pierced by the flying weapons, and the powerful impact knocked them flying several thousand feet away. Suddenly, a sheet of blood-red light swept down from the sky and tightly bound their bodies. In just a blink of an eye, all their blood and flesh essence were absorbed by the blood-red light, and the ferocious aura of the banner of Qiyu grew even stronger. After killing nearly 100 Qin soldiers, Xiang Yu threw his head back and let out a long laugh. Abruptly, he raised the coiling dragon spear up high and roared, "Xiang Yu, am invincible." At the same time, several tens of thousands of Xiang clan soldiers cried out at the top of their voices, "We, Xiang clan, are invincible." The banner of Qiyu had absorbed all the ferocious fighting will emanating from the tens of thousands of Xiang Chu soldiers, transforming them into several thousand beams of blood-red light that shot out and plunged deep into the surrounding mountain ridges. Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe with all his power. Amidst the dim divine light, he saw thousands of blood-red beams piercing through the restrictive spell symbols in the mountain ridges with an unparalleled killing intent. Like a rapidly spreading virus, they quickly devoured and even destroyed the existence of those restrictive spell symbols. Contaminated by the frightening demonic energy of the banner of Chiyu, the restrictive spell symbols in several dozens of nearby mountain ridges were forcibly changed into a blood-red formation that emanated a savage aura and was densely packed with the intent of killing. Suddenly, several dozens of pitch-black mountain ridges turned into a blinding blood-red color, emitting a dazzling blood-red gleam that shone on the bodies of the Qin soldiers guarding on top of the mountains. Thick white smoke rose from these soldiers' bodies, and they let out painful cries of despair. Amidst the blood-red gleam, these Qin soldiers slowly melted like candles being roasted by a raging flame, and all their blood and flesh were absorbed by the mountain ridges. Shockingly, under the demonic energy of the banner of Chiyu, these mountain ridges had turned into monsters that could devour human flesh and blood. Nourished by the blood and essence of these soldiers, the blood-red gleam that kept darting about in these blood-red mountain ridges were like hungry wolves that had just eaten their fill, quickly spreading out and spreading into the surrounding mountain ridges. One after another, the mountain ridges were tainted by the blood-red gleam. Not only did the murderous aura emanated from the Qin soldiers guarding the formation fail to attack Xiangyu, it had instead become the best nourishment for the banner of Chiyu, nourishing it and making it even more ferocious, as it kept seizing the control of the restrictive spell formations in these mountain ridges. In just a short 15 minutes, over 500 mountain ridges had turned blood-red. A frightening murderous aura towered into the sky, turning this part of the world into a bloody slaughterhouse. Sitting on the back of the dark horse, Xiangyu stared proudly at Gigazi, who was standing on top of the altar in the distance, and said, "What other abilities do you have, old fogey? Show me." With the banner of Chiyu protecting me, no blade, sword, axe or battle-axe can hurt me, no flame or ice can touch me, no evil ghosts from the netherworld dares to come near me, and no celestial fiends dares to touch me. So, what abilities do you have to lay out a formation to hurt me, old fogey? Looking at the scene, Wu Qi was drooling. The banner of Chiyu was indeed a treasure left behind by an ancient celestial fiend. Its ferocious flame was simply unparalleled. In Wu Qi's eyes, a part of the control of the defensive formation was forcibly seized away by the banner of Chiyu, and it was still spreading and spreading. Judging from the current situation, if Gigazi did not make some changes to the formation, sooner or later, Xiangyu would be able to take control of the entire formation. At that point of time, it would not be the mighty army of Xiang clan that would be trapped here, but the mighty army of Daqin led by Yingzheng. Facing the banner of Chiyu with a towering ferocious flame, Yingzheng was struck dumb. Almost instinctively, he pulled out the imperial seal. As he was about to use the power of the human emperor contained in the seal to destroy the banner of Chiyu, Li Si and Su Fu stopped him from doing so. Although the imperial seal possessed an incredible power, it had to be powered by Yingzheng's human emperor blood essence and the aura of virtue. With Yingzheng's current cultivation base, blood essence, and aura, he would need to consume 100 years of his lifespan to power the imperial seal with just one strike. The price was too heavy. On top of that, it was still a question whether the imperial seal of Daqin dynasty could restrain the banner of Chiyu, which was left behind by the ancient celestial fiend Chiyu. Chiyu was killed by the legendary ancient human emperor, the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan. Although Yingzheng claimed to be the first emperor, his virtues, cultivation base, and divine abilities could not be compared with the Yellow Emperor, one of the ancestors of the human race. It was not hard to imagine that the imperial seal might not be able to restrain the banner of Chiyu, and there was a greater possibility that the imperial seal would be devoured by the banner of Chiyu as well. Right when Yingzheng and all his ministers were at a loss of what to do, Gigazi, who was standing on top of the altar with his brows knitted in deep thought, suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, "Don't worry, your majesty. There is something that can restrain the banner of Chiyu." How could a mere fiend resist the righteous energy of the heaven and earth? With a casual wave of his hand, Gigazi grabbed the imperial seal from Yingzheng's hand from 10,000 miles away. At the same time, the sword of Qin Emperor in front of Yingzheng transformed into a beam of golden light and flew over to Gigazi. Then, Gigazi cried out at the top of his voice, "Your Majesty, please write an imperial edict with your own hands, ordering the heaven and earth to subdue this fiend left behind by an ancient fiend." Li Si and Su Fu quickly took out a blank scroll of imperial edict and a brush and ink made of cinnabar. Yingzheng dripped his blood essence onto the brush and wrote an imperial edict with the quickest speed possible. With a casual wave of his hand, Gigazi grabbed the imperial edict and stamped it heavily with the imperial seal. After that, he threw the imperial edict into the void and cried out, "Heaven and earth, ghosts and deities, all the living beings in all directions, hear the name of the human emperor of Daqin." In the void, an enormous power of law, which was completely different from the natural energy, was vaguely activated. As Gigazi recited the incantation, the dark clouds in the void became thicker and denser. Electric arcs that looked like flood dragons were seen rocking and rocking rapidly in the clouds. Gradually, the densely packed electric arcs converged into an ocean of thunderbolts, dyeing the dark clouds in the void a dazzling golden color. Then, an enormous, awe-inspiring pressure of the heaven and earth came pressing down from the void. Abruptly, the ferocious flame of the banner of Qiyu came to a halt, and the spreading blood-red light stopped abruptly. Gigazi laughed and said, "Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, with your current cultivation base, do you have the qualification to control the banner of Qiyu? It is nothing more than the ferocious flame of this fiend acting on its own. Without the power of ghosts and deities, there is no way you can control the item of ghosts and deities. Today, this old man will let you understand how a rotten old man, a dead old man, teaches a child like you a lesson." The imperial seal and the sword of Qin Emperor had also transformed into golden beams and shot up into the dense golden clouds in the sky. Gigazi circulated his energy and roared suddenly, "All soldiers of Daqin, listen to my order. Kneel down before me, meditate on His Majesty's visage, and chant the human emperor's mantra of subduing devils together with me." On top of the mountain ridge, over 1 million Qin soldiers knelt down and kowtowed to the heaven. Thinking of Yingzheng's visage together, they began to recite a short incantation together with Gigazi. All the soldiers of Qin army were elite warriors, full of vigor and vigor. When over 1 million soldiers knelt down and kowtowed at the same time, the power of faith generated by them was comparable to that of over 100 million common people. An enormous power of faith was gathering in the void, transforming into a vast and mighty aura of the human emperor by the imperial edict, imperial seal, and sword of Qin Emperor hovering in the sky. The surrounding mountains no longer extracted the natural energy and transformed it into blade beams and sword energies to attack the enemies. Instead, they sent all the natural energies directly into the sky, into the imperial edict, imperial seal, and sword of Qin Emperor. With the support of the enormous natural energies coming from underground, the layers of clouds in the sky grew thicker and thicker, and the power of thunder became stronger and stronger. A tremendous pressure came crashing down from the sky, and the blood-red light that spread out from the banner of Qiyu actually began to roll back gradually. Gigazi's eyes shone with a bright gleam that measured 100 miles long as he cried out sternly, "Xiang Yu, you are not Qiyu. How can you control the banner of Qiyu?" Then, he casually pointed his finger out, and the golden clouds in the sky began to descend abruptly. Like a world-destroying thunderstorm, millions of thunderbolts, each measuring about 1 million miles in diameter, came whistling down with deafening rumbles. The thunderstorm formed from thunderbolts had gathered the natural energy from an area of several tens of thousands of miles in circumference, the power of faith from over 1 million Qin soldiers, and the aura of human emperor from Yingzheng. It transformed into a righteous, mighty energy of righteousness that could destroy everything, and smashed viciously onto the banner of Qiyu. Everything under the heaven and earth had a natural counterbalance to each other. The banner of Qiyu was not afraid of any murderous aura from sabers, spears, swords, and halberds, and it was not afraid of any evil and ferocious energies of fiends, deities, and ghosts. But, what the banner of Qiyu feared the most was this righteous, mighty force of the heaven and earth, and the vast and boundless willpower of the human emperor. In those years, the human emperor, Xian Yuan, had killed Qiyu. So, today, the human emperor, Yingzheng, could also defeat Xiang Yu. Countless thunderbolts came crashing down. Xiang Yu's body trembled violently, and sticky blood kept bursting out from his 7 apertures. The banner of Qiyu fluttered and writhed in the sky, letting out shrill cries and howls. But, under the bombardment of the endless thunderbolts, the ferocious flame of the banner of Chiyu gradually dissipated, and eventually transformed into a faint blood-red light that shot back into Xiang Yu's body. The thunderbolts came crashing down, and just as they were about to turn Xiang Yu and the several tens of thousands of Xiang clan soldiers behind him into nothingness, a huge black hole suddenly ripped open in the void. Amidst the simple and honest chanting that was filled with the aura of the people living in the mountains and forests, two large hands as white as jade reached out from the black hole, thrusting forcefully towards the thunderbolts that came crashing down from the sky. The chanting abruptly turned into a sonorous prayer, as if countless ancient people were praying to the heaven and earth. A tremendous willpower swept across the sky. Countless ghosts and deities materialized in broad daylight, their faces solemn and respectful as they followed the two large hands and shot up into the sky. Millions of ghosts and deities had manifested out of thin air, and the willpower of the common people had shattered the heaven and earth. The thunderclouds that blotted the sky were torn into pieces by the two hands and the countless ghosts and deities. After that, the two hands gently grabbed and released, teleporting Xiang Yu and the several tens of thousands of soldiers out of the formation. Gigazi cried out in shock, "Who is the mighty expert? How could you possess such a divine ability?" Soundlessly, the two hands retracted back, and a voice that was as gentle as water and faintly sounded like the knocking of a beautiful jade was heard coming from afar. "It is not my own power. This is the convergence of the souls of all the ancestors of Great Chu, and the power of ghosts and deities under the heaven and earth. I, Chu Ping of Great Chu, dare not covet the credit of heaven." The dark clouds that blotted the sky dispersed, and the several tens of thousands of mountains underneath suddenly crumbled and crumbled at the same time. Chapter 231. Chu Ping of Great Chu. For a moment, Wu Qi could not figure out who this man was. But very soon, all the information about this man's life came flooding out from Lu Xiaobai's memory. If there was no one with the same name, then this Chu Ping should be that man, the minister of third minister of Great Chu, Chu Yuan. Looking at the direction where the shattered hole in the sky was slowly healing, Wu Qi took a deep breath. When he thought of the name Chu Yuan, almost instinctively, a faint aroma of bamboo leaves emerged at the tip of his nose. How many dumplings had he eaten since he was young? If he could meet the man who had made countless people eat dumplings for several thousand years in this world, at this moment, it would be a great feeling. Wu Qi laughed. Even though Ying Zheng and Xiang Yu were glaring at each other with daggers drawn, he still felt it was a great feeling. Not only Chu Yuan, even Ying Zheng and Xiang Yu looked so adorable in his eyes right now. Suddenly, Wu Qi thought of all the people around him, no matter it was Yan Dan, Jing Ke, Su Qin, or Han Fei, they were all history, a living history. If he could return to Earth, perhaps he could steal a handful of hair from these people and bring it back to Earth, and he would be able to make a fortune. Narrowing his eyes and wearing a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi glanced at the people around him with a pleasant mood. This was a great feeling. To be able to be with them, to be able to breathe the air of the same world with them, to be able to grieve and rejoice with them, to be able to face their enemies head-on, this was a great feeling. Even though Ying Zheng had taken him, Wu Qi, as an enemy, to be able to take advantage of a man like Ying Zheng was an indescribable feeling. There were thousands of disciples in Underhand's sect, but only he, Wu Qi, was able to steal something from the first emperor of Daqin, Ying Zheng, and succeed in doing so. A great ambition was born in Wu Qi's mind. His eyes were darting about furtively, as he regarded all the people around him as his potential targets in the future. Up in the sky, Ying Zheng and Gigazi looked at the shattered hole in the sky, and suddenly breathed out a long sigh at the same time. Gigazi cried out, "Great Chu's Chu Ping." Third Minister Chu Yuan really lived up to his reputation. Only such a person could use such a stunning and peerless divine ability. "Xiang Yu, what is the status of that Chu Ping in Great Chu now?" With a complicated expression, Xiang Yu stared at the void. After a long while, he finally roared in a low, muffled voice, "That pedantic scholar, now, he can be considered as the king of Great Chu." Furiously, He swung the coiling dragon spear and said, "If not for Huang Xia and Li Yuan, that pretty boy, holding me back, I would have already ascended to the throne of Great Chu. Bastards, they were the ones who kept pestering me. I had no choice but to part ways." None of us could become the king of the Great Chu, and that pedantic scholar could only ascend the throne. After cursing for a while, Xiang Yu suddenly laughed and said, "But it seems that he has done a good job these 2,000 years. Narrowing his eyes, Xiang Yu gave Zheng and Gigazi a glance, then laughed and said, "I dare not boast about other things, but if we are talking about the vastness of our territory and the number of our people, during my journey to the north, I passed by Great Wei and Great Zhao, and even sneaked into their capital and lived there for a few years. That's how I obtained some information about them. The territory of Great Chu is 30 times larger than theirs, and the population of Great Chu is 100 times larger than theirs." Sticking out his chest proudly, Xiang Yu turned to Zheng, whose face had turned pale, and said, "Great Wei and Great Zhao have been slaughtering barbarians and expanding their territory. As for Great Chu, because that pedantic scholar Chu Ping eloped with their holy daughter, he became the queen of Great Chu. Therefore, Great Chu absorbed the barbarians and formed a kingdom of its own. Wherever we went, the barbarians would surrender at the first sight of us. The overall strength of Great Chu is far greater than any other kingdoms." Xiang Yu's loud laughter towered into the sky, and all the mighty soldiers behind him were laughing complacently as well. Amidst the loud laughter of these mighty soldiers, one after another, they lifted up the masks on their helmets and revealed their faces. Among the 80,000 mighty soldiers of Great Chu, over 60,000 of them had colorful tattoos on their faces, and their cheeks were densely covered with the unique patterns of venomous bugs, wild beasts, skeletons, ghosts, and other barbarians. Zheng opened his mouth, but could not say a word for a long while. Yan Dan's body swayed, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Seducing the barbarian holy daughter and eloping with her, holding her hostage to order the barbarians. This method is indeed effective. But too bad, Great Yen was founded by slaughtering barbarians. Among the barbarian holy daughters, 17 of them were killed by Dan. What a Great Chu! What a Chu Ping! What a Xiang Yu! He is obviously a talented overlord, but he is willing to submit to Chu Ping. This Great Chu! Great Chu! Yan Dan took a deep breath and bit his lips tightly. Even Wu Qi felt his head spinning. The territory of Great Chu was 30 times larger than that of Great Wei and Great Zhao, and its population was at least 100 times larger than that of the two dynasties. If that was the case, the national strength of Great Chu was at least 10 times greater than that of Great Yen, or even Daqin, or even more. Obviously, the speed of development of Great Chu, who had always been in a friendly relationship with barbarians, and had even fused with their bloodline, was far beyond that of Great Yen, who had been fighting a bloody war with barbarians year after year, and had even issued a barbarian hunting order to purchase the heads of barbarians. What a great minister Chu Yuan! Wu Qi breathed out a heavy sigh of relief. Suddenly, both Zheng and Gigazi turned to look at Wu Qi at the same time. A strange gleam flickered in Zheng's eyes as he cried out sternly, "Yan Dan, since you are here, why are you still peeping at us? Are you waiting for me and Xiang Yu to fight to the death, so that you can take advantage of the situation?" Then, he waved his hand casually, unleashing a powerful airflow that came sweeping over and parted a nearly 1,000 miles long cloudy path. The 10 miles wide cloudy path was completely empty, and not even a single cloud or mist could be seen, revealing the blue sky. It went from the front of Wu Qi and his company all the way to the front of Zheng's chariot. Yan Dan gave a loud and sonorous laugh, then stepped on a cloud and flew along the cloudy path. "Elder brother Zheng, long time no see," he said with a loud voice. When Yan Dan left the chariot, it was natural that Wu Qi and the other ministers had to follow closely behind him. 5 great demon kings brought a large group of their disciples and grand disciples, riding on demon clouds and gales and following closely behind. Waiting Dragon King was taken aback. He glanced to the left and right, then helplessly brought his son, 3 great demon subordinates, and nearly 100 nascent soul demon warriors, slowly treading on the water and following behind the group of cultivators. When he heard Yan Dan addressing him as elder brother Zheng, Ying Zheng's face twitched abruptly, and a complicated expression emerged on his face. But very soon, his expression turned extremely cold, and the cold gleam in his eyes became completely emotionless. He stared at Yan Dan coldly and said in an indifferent tone, "It has been over 2,000 years since I last heard someone addressing me as elder brother Zheng. Dan, if you, great Yan, are willing to submit to me and merge with Daqin, I'll confer you the title of king." Yan Dan laughed and said, "Elder brother Zheng, Ying Zheng, your majesty, if you, Daqin, are willing to submit to great Yan, I can forego the enmity of those years, and allow you to be the king of Siding in Great Yan, a prosperous and peaceful land." Pointing his finger at Ying Zheng, Yan Dan smiled and said, "I'm more generous than your majesty. How can a mere title of king compare to the king of Siding in Great Yan?" Ying Zheng shook his head, stared at Yan Dan, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Of course it can. Great Yan is not as good as Daqin, so any title of king in Daqin can be compared to the king of Siding in Great Yan." Yan Dan, it seems like you suddenly have the confidence to face me head-on. But, with those 3 inferior assassins around you, what makes you think you have the qualification to fight me? Upon hearing Ying Zheng's words, Yan Dan could not help but burst into a loud laughter. Stepping on clouds, Mod and Sun Kuang flew out from behind Yan Dan, cupped their fists and bowed slightly to Ying Zheng. "Mod from Mo sect offers greeting, your majesty," said Mod coolly. "Confucian sect, Sun Kuang," said Sun Kuang coolly. Ying Zheng's face fell instantly. He gave Mod a quick glance, then fixed his eyes on Sun Kuang. Gigazi's face flickered as well. He flew forward, cupped his fist and bowed to Sun Kuang, and said, "Brother Sun Qing, do you still remember my old friend, Wang Su of Gigazi?" After that, he cupped his fist and bowed to Mod, "Greetings, Grand Master of Mo sect, Gigazi." Mod and Sun Kuang returned Gigazi's greeting at the same time. The 3 of them exchanged a glance and smiled, then flew a few miles away on clouds, chatting and laughing with each other. The 3 of them talked and laughed in a carefree manner, and there was no air of hostility between them. Wu Qi could not help but sigh with emotion in his mind. This was the true spirit of a grandmaster. With these 3 men standing right in front of them, it was impossible for them to fight each other. Ying Zheng twitched his mouth in anger. Suddenly, he turned to look at Han Fei, who stood next to Yan Dan, and said, "Mr. Han Fei, the post of Prime Minister of Daqin is vacant. Can you accept it?" Han Fei shook his head at Ying Zheng and did not say a word, just like a wooden man. Yan Dan roared with laughter as well. He turned to Li Si and Su Fu, who stood next to Ying Zheng, and shouted, "Mr. Li Si, Mr. Su Fu, if both of you are willing to come to Great Yan Dynasty, you can choose any position like Prime Minister or Imperial Advisor of Great Yan Dynasty. Apart from the throne of the Emperor of Great Yan, you can have whatever title of nobility. How much land do you want? Just tell me, and I'm willing to treat you with the courtesy of a master." Xiang Yu, who felt that he was being ignored, roared furiously, "You are both heroes of the generation, so why are you putting on such a hypocritical and pedantic look? Be it Ying Zheng or Yan Dan, who wants to have a fair and square fight with me? Han Fei, Li Si, Su Fu. Once I twist off the head of your masters, you will naturally come and serve me obediently." Han Fei, Li Si, and Su Fu turned to look at Xiang Yu at the same time and cried out angrily, "What a stinky fart." Han Fei casually pointed his finger out, and the natural energies around Xiang Yu shattered and vanished into nothingness. Then, Li Si waved his hand, and a violent thunderbolt descended from the sky, smashing viciously towards Xiang Yu's head. On the other side, Su Fu recited a spell with an insidious voice. Suddenly, 3 huge and ferocious ghosts emerged from the void, clawing and pulling at Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu was infuriated. He raised his hand and punched, shattering the joint attack of 3 men. Then, he let out a loud roar, raised his spear and prepared to charge into the enemy formation with 80,000 mighty soldiers. Even if he were to face both Ing Zheng and Yan Dan at the same time, he was confident that he could defeat them with his army. This was Xiang Yu, the pride of the hegemon king of Western Chu. Amidst the chaotic atmosphere, a long and evil laugh was suddenly heard coming from afar. With so many heroes gathered here, this is indeed a gathering of heroes. How could Lao Ai not join in the fun? Ha ha ha, all of you are dragons among men. Together with Lao Ai, today's gathering can be named as the Gathering of Four Dragons. Isn't that a wonderful event? A melodious tune was heard coming from afar, as Lao Ai, clad in a bright red robe, stepped on a cloud, and escorted by several hundred enchanting beauties and nearly 1,000 burly men, was flying at top speed. Lao Ai's long hair hung loosely over his shoulders, and a strange gleam could be seen flashing in his eyes as he fixed his gaze on Ing Zheng. Suddenly, 3 loud shouts came from Chi-Chi, "Get the hell out of here, Lao Ai! Gathering of 4 dragons? You are not qualified." Ing Zheng, Xiang Yu, and Yan Dan roared furiously at Lao Ai at the same time. He Mo's face suddenly turned extremely unsightly, while Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and looked at He Mo with a broad smile. Chapter 232. He Mo, who came riding on a cloud complacently, had his face instantly changed. He stopped abruptly and glared at Yan Dan and the other 2 with a venomous look. Yan Dan gave Lao Ai a sidelong glance and said coldly, "Lao Ai, although I am not a talented man, I am still the monarch of a kingdom. You have been hiding in Great Yen for over 2,000 years, using Great Yen to hide yourself and carry out those treacherous schemes. I despise you. You lost to me in the bet in the drill ground, and you are defeated by me. I despise you even more. Since you could not win the bet, and failed to seize my kingdom, what makes you think you are qualified to stand side by side with me?" Ing Zheng stared at Lao Ai coldly and said, "Lao Ai, you are just a eunuch in my palace. Why don't you kneel down and pay your respect to me? It has been over 2,000 years since we last met, and have you forgotten that I am the monarch, your master? You are a eunuch, a dog under my feet. What makes a dog qualified to stand side by side with me? Are you crazy, or are you stupid?" Lao Ai's face turned red, then pale, then red again. Suddenly, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. He pointed a trembling finger at Yan Dan and Ing Zheng, his lips twitching as if he wanted to say something. But, before he could say anything, Xiang Yu, who was rubbing his coiling dragon spear, roared impatiently, "Stop pretending to be a decent man. Ing Zheng, the first emperor of Daqin, a mighty monarch. Yan Dan, the crown prince of Yan Kingdom, a retainer of Great Yen who also attempted to assassinate a dragon. Now, he is the monarch of Great Yen, a hero of his generation. I have run amok under the heaven, killed all the members of Daqin imperial clan, and boasted that I am also a peerless overlord. It is only natural that the 3 of us call ourselves the 3 Dragons Union." Laughing coldly and arrogantly, Xiang Yu gave Lao Ai's crotch a mocking glance, then raised his head and roared, "You, Lao Ai, I have heard of your name as well. You are a fake eunuch who relies on your bird. Without your bird, you are nothing but a lowly man. What makes you qualified to be called the 4 dragons with us? Bah, look at that thing in your crotch. Is it even a dragon?" Yan Dan's words were considered polite, and Ing Zheng's words were polite. However, Xiang Yu's words were like a bunch of scolding with spears and sticks. Lao Ai, who had just coughed out a mouthful of blood because of Ing Zheng, trembled and coughed out another mouthful of blood on the spot. Trembling, he gave Yan Dan a look. Yan Dan was flanked by 2 mighty experts, Sun Kuang and Mod. Then, he turned to look at Ing Zheng in exasperation. Ing Zheng was flanked by Gigazi, as well as a group of valiant civil and military officials from Daqin dynasty. None of them were easy to deal with. Especially when Lao Ai was friends with Li Si and Su Fu, he knew that these people were cruel and merciless, and had countless trump cards. Therefore, he did not have the courage to provoke them. Panicked and exasperated, Lao Ai narrowed his eyes and stared at Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu. You call yourself an overlord, but who do you think you are? I, Lao Ai, swear here and now that I will wipe out your entire clan and rape all your women and children. Lao Ai's long hair stood up, and a pink mist towered up into the sky around him, while a boundless evil aura surged and rushed in all directions. Suddenly, the several hundred enchanting beauties and nearly 1,000 burly men around him let out flirtatious moans at the same time. An enchanting aura spread out in all directions, while a powerful evil force rushed toward the souls and nascent divinities of the people around them. In just a blink of an eye, the clothes worn by those beauties and burly men had vanished without a trace. In the presence of so many people, they began to have sex in groups of 3 to 5. A tremor ran through Wu Qi's body. Suddenly, a wisp of evil flame rushed up from his lower abdomen. The Jin Dan in his dantian trembled abruptly, and the evil flame emerged from the core of the Jin Dan. If it were an ordinary Jin Dan, the Jin Dan would have been burned to ashes, and all their cultivation base would have gone down the drain. Fortunately, Wu Qi's Jin Dan was protected by 5 acquired spirit pearls, and the enormous acquired energies of 5 elements had firmly stabilized the foundation of his Jin Dan. No matter how the evil flame wreaked havoc, it could not do anything to Wu Qi. Instead, it helped him to temper his Jin Dan and his mind. While cheering, the 7 holy deities and devils rushed into the Jin Dan from Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, and began to devour the evil flame, which contained a boundless lustful aura. The movements of the men and women around Lao Ai became bigger and bigger, as the fiend technique had reached its climax. The lustful flame in Wu Qi's Jin Dan grew stronger and stronger, but it only provided nourishment for Wu Qi's 7 holy deities and devils, and did not damage his foundation at all. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes with a straight face, enjoying the performance of the men and women around Lao Ai. It was as if he was back on Earth, watching those adult programs that were not suitable for children. Suddenly, 2 big hands pressed on his back, and 2 streams of bone-piercing cold energy were injected into Wu Qi's dantian, rushing straight towards the evil flame in it. Wu Qi turned his head in surprise, and saw that it was Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xiansheng, who were exercising their cultivation base to resist the attack of the fiend technique while helping Wu Qi dispel the evil force. As Lord Xiansheng was a mighty expert who was about to form his nascent divinity, Lao Ai's fiend technique did not have much effect on him. However, Catfish Flood Dragon's cultivation base was far weaker than Lord Xiansheng, and her Flood Dragon bloodline was not as strong as his. Her dragon energies were impure, and she was greatly affected by such a fiend technique. Facing Lao Ai's despicable fiend technique, Catfish Flood Dragon was under much greater pressure. Her body was shivering, and when she saw that she was about to lose control of her mind, she still helped Wu Qi to suppress the evil flame. It showed that she had a pretty good temperament. As the saying went, a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. She must be this kind of demon, right? Although she was a little silly, Wu Qi did not mind having more of such demons. He took a deep breath, and the Jin Dan in Wu Qi's dantian began to move. The 5 acquired spirit pearls began to spin rapidly, and a great amount of acquired energies of 5 elements rushed into Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon's bodies through his body, flowing quickly through them to help them refine the impurities in their fleshly bodies and improve the purity of their Flood Dragon bloodline. As Wu Qi had been cultivating the dragon transformation script for some time, he had a very deep understanding of its essence. With his help, both Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xiansheng felt their bodies were boiling hot, as if their blood essence was burning, and a great amount of impurities were quickly dispelled. Wu Qi turned his head and smiled at Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon, then nodded and said, "Thank you, both of you. Wu Qi has an extraordinary treasure with me, so I can protect myself. I really appreciate your kindness." The circulation of the energies in Wu Qi's body increased, and more acquired energies of 5 elements kept rushing into Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xiansheng's bodies. Lord Xiansheng smiled, narrowed his eyes, and increased the amount of dragon energies he sent into Wu Qi's body. Almost instinctively, Catfish Flood Dragon sent even more dragon energies into Wuqi's body, and after they were refined by the 5 elements spirit pearls, they returned to their bodies. The blood essence and energy in their bodies were at least 100 times stronger than Wuqi's. Wuqi was helping them purify their energy essence, and at the same time, their dragon energy essence was also improving the strength of his body. It was indeed a win-win situation, where he returned the favor. While Wuqi and his companions were sharing the benefits, Lao Ai's shameless evil technique had annoyed Xiang Yu. As a hot-tempered man, Xiang Yu could not tolerate even a grain of sand in his eyes. Therefore, when he saw Lao Ai shamelessly asking his disciples to put on a grand show in front of so many people, a great rage immediately rushed to his head. On top of that, there were several tens of thousands of soldiers with the cultivation base of Jin Dan among Great Chu's mighty army. Seeing that their bodies were on the verge of collapsing, Xiang Yu let out a furious roar. Immediately, the 18 giant undead warriors standing behind him let out thunderous roars, formed a formation and charged towards Lao Ai. A smile emerged on Ing Zheng and Yan Dan's faces at the same time. At the same time, both men ordered their subordinates to retreat, as they wanted to witness the overall strength of Xiang Yu and Lao Ai. In the future, both Xiang Yu and Lao Ai would be their archenemies, and it would only benefit them if they could have a fight with them first. There were 18 gigantic zombies, each towering 10,000 feet tall. No one knew where Xiang Yu found such gigantic corpses and refined them into powerful zombies. However, these 18 human-shaped undead warriors were definitely not the skeletons of a human being. Not only did they stand 10,000 feet tall, their skin was densely covered with dark scales, and there were more or less sharp horns growing on their heads. Their facial bones looked more like those of wild beasts. A few of them even had long tails that looked like the tails of cows trailing behind their buttocks. These non-human features indicated that they might be the skeletons of some ancient clan, and had nothing to do with human beings. The 18 giant undead warriors roared and charged towards Lao Ai, surrounding him and over 1,000 disciples. After that, they raised their arms and smashed them down viciously towards Lao Ai's head. Not long ago, these undead warriors were spitting out a crimson flame from their mouths, turning all the condemned prisoners in one of Qin's cities into nothingness. But now, their fists were covered in a thick layer of dark flame. 36 giant fists plunged down from the sky like shooting stars, smashing down with deep, muffled whistling noises. Lao Ai was indeed a peerless evil man. He waved his arms and let out a long, loud laugh that shook the sky. Suddenly, a large sheet of pink mist sprayed out from the bodies of over 1,000 disciples who were having sex crazily around him. In just a blink of an eye, all of them were sucked into Lao Ai's body. After being replenished by an enormous amount of lustful aura, Lao Ai's body had expanded to the height of 30 feet. His clothes exploded abruptly, revealing his extremely muscular body. Blood surged from his lower body, making him look like a spear piercing into the sky. His clone was emitting a faint golden gleam, while the natural energies around him were being oppressed by a tremendous force, producing crackling noises. With his clone as the core, a very vast fiend energy kept circling around him, making his blood vessels expand and his muscles swell, making him look like an ancient celestial fiend. Facing the giant fists of 18 giant undead warriors, Lao Ai did not show any sign of weakness. He raised both fists up and met them head-on. Great Sun Technique. Break! He roared at the top of his voice. All of a sudden, 10 streams of pinkish energy burst out from Lao Ai's 10 fingers. The pinkish energy burst into flames abruptly, transforming into a huge ball of light that looked as dazzling as a small sun, emanating a boundless evil aura. Vaguely, one could see countless enchanting naked girls singing and dancing inside the ball of light. Accompanied by a beautiful melody, the ball of light was thrown out from Lao Ai's hand, smashing forcefully into the heavy fists of the giant undead warriors. A sweet moan of a girl rang out. Suddenly, the void was filled with a strong, enchanting pink light, and a magnificent garden emerged in midair. Countless exotic flowers and plants could be seen growing in the garden, where hundreds of millions of naked beauties and handsome men were having sex to their heart's content. 18 giant undead warriors were trapped in the garden, running around aimlessly like headless flies. If an ordinary cultivator were trapped in this garden, it would not take long for his soul to be controlled by the lustful aura. His spirit, energy, and soul would be burned into ashes by the Yin flame, and all his cultivation base would become Lao Ai's tonic. But unfortunately, it was 18 undead warriors who were trapped here, 18 undead warriors who had completely lost their living instincts. These giant undead warriors were only stunned for a brief moment in the illusion of the garden, before they roared furiously, waving their fists wildly in all directions, while spewing out crimson flames from their mouths. Lao Ai's body trembled. He kept performing incantation gestures with both hands, barely maintaining the illusion. While maintaining the illusion with all his cultivation base, he roared fiercely, "Xiang Yu, do all these monsters possess the strength of early-stage nascent divinity realm?" Xiang Yu did not answer. Nobody knew when he had arrived in front of Lao Ai on his mount, thrusting his spear right in front of his face. 18 giant undead warriors with the overall strength equivalent to early-stage nascent divinity realm had pinned down all of Lao Ai's energy, making him incapable of resisting Xiang Yu's sudden thrust. Amidst a blinding black gleam, the spear flashed across the air, and a jet of blood shot up into the sky. Lao Ai let out a miserable howl of extreme hatred. Chapter 233. Before Xiang Yu's words could fade away, a loud laughter suddenly rang out from all directions. It was especially true for Su Meier, who was laughing so hard that her body was convulsing. She was lying on the shoulders of 2 fox demon disciples, shaking and nearly falling down from the clouds. Pointing her finger at Xiang Yu, she said, "Xiang Yu looks like a hero, but I never knew that he would be attracted by this big guy just like us girls." "He, Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, how did you fall in love with this treasure?" Lao Ai flew into a rage, pointing his finger at the direction where Xiang Yu disappeared and cursed. Then, he pulled out a small golden bell and lightly knocked on it. The ringing of the bell was melodious and pleasant to the ear, bringing with it a faintly discernible lingering feeling. The male and female disciples who were exercising a fiend technique sprung up into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, they had dressed up and stood behind Lao Ai with expressionless faces. Looking at the direction where Xiang Yu fled, Yan Dan shook his head and said, "Strong, very strong. But, what worried me the most was that this Xiang Yu is not an easy man to deal with. 80,000 Jin Dan soldiers are nothing, but the one leading them is a hegemon king. Yan Dan is afraid that this hegemon king will not be easy to deal with." Hiss, the few fox demon girls giggled and turned to look at Lao Ai with their watery eyes. Both of them exchanged a glance, then burst out laughing at the same time. But, there was no warmth or joy in their laughter anymore. With their faces darkened, the Xiang Yu soldiers turned their chariots around and rode away in a hurry, following behind Xiang Yu. Not only did Xiang Yu humiliate himself with the spear, he had also humiliated all the Xiang Yu soldiers, making them wish they could disappear from the world at this very moment. Loud rumbling noises echoed out as the 18 giant undead warriors broke free from Lao Ai's illusion. It was as if they had realized that their master had done something shameful. Holding their heads with both hands, they followed closely behind the Xiang Yu soldiers and fled in a flurry. "Oh!" Su Meier answered with a bright gleam in her eyes as she turned to look at Lao Ai, who was waving his arms and cursing. Lowering her voice, she giggled and said, "My boys, 2 of you will go tonight and have a good test of this Prince of Changxin's abilities." "Hee, I never expected that there would be someone like me in Great Yan Dynasty, a good man who cultivates the technique of combining yin and yang. If he's capable, then let him come and find the elder ancestor. If he's just a spearhead that looks like silver, then I'll suck his marrow dry and let him know that not every spear can be taken out to show off." Amidst the surrounding mountain ridges, several 100,000 practitioners and millions of elite soldiers of Qin army flew out from their hiding places, forming into a great formation, escorting Yin Zheng and his company as they retreated westward at top speed. Behind them, a large cloud was also used. Countless Yen soldiers flew over on their flying Dharma artifacts, protecting Yen Dan, who was severely injured and vomiting blood, as they retreated. Gue Guzi, Sun Kuang, and Mod were all martial grandmasters. Even though Yin Zheng and Yen Dan were emperors, they did not dare to do so. The cultivation of masters like Han Fei, Li Si, and Su Fu. The valiant spirit of Jing Ku, Fan Yuqi, Bai Qi, Wang Jian, and the other great generals. The ferocity and ruthlessness of all the demon kings. On top of that, with Wu Qi's eyesight and knowledge as a freak, when they saw the result of Xiang Yu's spear thrust, they still gasped at the same time, and subconsciously twisted their waists, putting their legs together unnaturally. Sensing the strange gazes from the surroundings, Xiang Yu suddenly had an urge to cry, but no tears came out. Hastily, he turned his head and roared, I was just, staring blankly at Lao Ai's split body. He breathed out a long sigh and said, what a tough guy. Swan and I, you demon, you really live up to your reputation. Yen Dan stopped laughing, shook his head, and said indifferently, although Lao Ai is now Great Yan's Prince of Changxin, and if His Majesty Yingzheng wants to kill him, as long as His Majesty has the means to do so, you can just kill him. But, Lao Ai's evil cultivation base is amazing, and he is a cunning and patient man. He is not an easy opponent. If a few of the famous ministers and generals serving His Majesty were killed by him, I will have to hold a feast to celebrate. Another gasp was heard coming from the surroundings. In an unnatural manner, Wu Qi clamped his thighs tightly. He turned to look at Xiang Yu with vigilance. He did not expect this hegemon king of Western Chu to have such a nasty hobby. He had actually chosen Lao Ai's vital part and thrust his spear right into it. It looked like he would have to be extra careful when going against Xiang Yu in the future. Apart from the heavenly fox Su Mei, and her female demons, all the other male creatures clamped their thighs tightly together. The sound of water splashing could be heard. Lao Ai, shivering from head to toe, lowered his head and looked at his lower body that was spraying blood. Suddenly, he threw his head back and roared crazily into the sky, Xiang Yu, you little punk. You are so shameless. You are such a shameless and unruly man. In a battle on the battlefield, do you purposely focus on your lower body? Lao Ai swears that I will kill you. I will kill you. I will tear your scales into pieces and kill you. After a brief moment of pondering, Yingzheng nodded slowly and said, the great Chu represented by Xiang Yu has appeared. I'm afraid our old friends will be dragged into this chaotic situation in the near future. We have endured for over 2,000 years, and finally, we have the strength to step out of our own territory, and finally, we have the strength to conquer the world. This world will no longer be lonely. But today, I've enjoyed myself to the fullest. Let's fight another day. I wonder if Yen Dan has the mood to fight me on the battlefield. Wu Qi was standing not too far away from Su Mei. Therefore, he heard her order loud and clear. He could not help but shake his head inwardly. It looked like Lao Ai was about to find himself a good backer. In the future, even if Yen Dan wanted to defeat Lao Ai, it would not be easy. Wu Qi had no doubt that Lao Ai could pass Su Mei's test. After all, this evil man had been cultivating the Great Sun technique for over 2,000 years, and he had spent all his effort on that precious fish. A few fox girls would not be able to defeat this evil man. Yingzheng pondered for a brief moment, then nodded slowly with a smile and said, all right. Today is different from the past. You and I both have great divine abilities, so how could we not fight alone in this decisive battle on the battlefield? As an emperor, he should naturally be invincible on the battlefield. Yen Dan and Yingzheng laughed at each other. Yen Dan did not explain to them that he was cultivating the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives. Instead, he pulled out a silver-white sword and thrust it toward Ing Zheng's face. Shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent emerged from behind Ing Zheng's back, while a large sheet of dark mist spread in all directions. Ing Zheng flipped his palm, and the sword of Qin Emperor appeared in his palm. He stared at Yan Dan and said coolly, "The 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic I'm cultivating is a technique that gathers the blood essence of dragons. When I kill a serpent, I gain the strength of a serpent. When I kill a flood dragon, I gain the strength of a flood dragon. When I kill a dragon, I gain the strength of a dragon. I'm the son of heaven, and this cultivation technique gathers the energy of a divine dragon to rule the world. It is the merit that should be given to the human emperor." A strange gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes as he gave a glance somewhere to the south. Behind a dense cloud, Xiang Yu was seen hiding in the cloud with a group of his subordinates, looking at the direction of the battle. Ing Zheng let out a long and sonorous laugh, while the sword of Qin Emperor shot out and greeted Yan Dan head-on. All of a sudden, the laughter of both men stopped abruptly. A strong light flashed, and Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe with all his might. He could barely see that in that very moment, both Yan Dan and Ing Zheng had exchanged 81 sword strikes at the same time, driving 81 magical techniques and divine abilities, and had smashed onto each other. Both of them were equipped with excellent defensive magical treasures, so when these soft and feeble sword strikes and magical techniques landed on each other, they did not cause any harm. Although both of them had unleashed such a mighty attack, it was just a feint, and they did not use any ultimate attack. A buzzing noise was heard coming out from Ing Zheng's body, as 9 three-legged cauldrons, each standing 90 feet tall and looking like illusions, rushed out from behind his back. 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent were hovering right above the 9 cauldrons. A vast and mighty aura of an emperor came rushing at their faces, bringing with it a spiritual pressure that was unique to flood dragons. Wu Qi and all the other men could not keep their balance, and were forced to retreat in all directions. It was especially true for Wanying Dragon King and the other aquatic clan members, as their faces turned extremely unsightly. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi murmured to himself, "So, the next battle will be the final one? Who was the one who could not hold back and struck first? Who was the one who was set up by someone else? Who will be the final winner?" Sighing, Wu Qi murmured to himself, "I don't care so much, as long as I can survive." However, among all the people present, there were Gigu, Zi, Mod, and Sun Kuang, who were all grandmasters. Lao Ai would be too ashamed to show his face to anyone. Bringing all his disciples, he sped away on the cloud, rushing back to Little Meng's city and hiding in his field headquarters, never coming out to meet anyone again. Ing Zheng pointed at the direction where Xiang Yu had fled and said coolly, 80,000 mighty Jin Dan soldiers, 80,000 demon beasts with demon cores, several tens of thousands of divine undead soldiers, 18 undead celestial fiends who are equivalent to early-stage nascent divinity cultivators. And the enigmatic Chu Ping, Huang Xia, Li Yuan, and a group of ministers and generals of Great Chu. On top of that, they have a territory and people 100 times larger than us. Yan Dan, what do you think about the overall strength of Great Chu? Xiang Yu nodded hastily and said, "You are right, my little friend. I was attracted by this thing." Lao Ai pulled out some spare clothes and put them on neatly. He gave Yan Dan and Ing Zheng a cold glance, then spun and left without saying a word. Today, he boasted that he was one of the 4 dragons, and wanted to stand on equal footing with Ing Zheng, Yan Dan, and Xiang Yu. But in the end, he was crushed by a single spear thrust from Xiang Yu, which made him too ashamed to show his face in front of anyone. It would be fine if all the people present were ordinary people, but Lao Ai had a thick skin, as he could still stay here as if nothing had happened. Wu Qi said in a strange voice, "You can only blame this thing for attracting you too much, and that's why you purposely aimed the spear at it." After laughing for a while, Ing Zheng suddenly stopped laughing and said coolly, "Lao Ai is a vile man, and I should kill him." Ayayaya. Only then did Xiang Yu realize that he had been tricked by Wu Qi's words, and had said something that was extremely misleading. He flew into a rage and roared, "Nonsense! I just found this fellow an eyesore, so I just casually shot him with my spear. How could I? Ayayaya. You are driving me mad. His face was flushed, and he raised his sleeve to cover his face. Then, he pulled out the coiling dragon spear, cursing all the ancestors of Wu Qi along the way as he rode back to the formation of Great Chu's mighty army. Yen Dan laughed. Suddenly, a grayish-white bright beam shot up into the sky from behind his back, as the disk of Great Tao Transmigration slowly rose up into the sky with a deep, muffled sound of spinning. Yen Dan stared at Yingzheng, who was a few miles away, and said with a smile, "Are you interested? Why don't your Majesty Yingzheng have a match with me today?" Amidst Tao's almost crazed howl, a thick pink mist covered his body. Amidst the jarring sound of metal rubbing against metal, Lao Ai's clone, which was ripped apart by the coiling dragon's spear, began to wriggle and heal itself. Very soon, it returned to its original state, and was still emitting a faint golden gleam. Yingzheng nodded his head and said with a smile, "Same to you, same to you. If I can behead Yen Dan, Jingku, Gao Jianli, and all the others, I'll definitely grant amnesty to the entire world, and let all the people celebrate this grand event with me." The spear thrust from Xiang Yu was too vicious, too sinister, and too harsh. He thrust the spear right at Lao Ai's crotch. It was not aimed at any other part of his body, but it went right into his urinal area, and went over 1 foot deep. All Lao Ai's skill was focused on his clone. When Xiang Yu thrust the coiling dragon spear into the clone, it actually produced a jarring sound of metal rubbing against metal, and produced a large amount of sparks. It was no longer a body of flesh and blood, but a mineral crystal similar to a diamond. Even with Xiang Yu's extraordinary strength and the strength of the upper-grade magical treasure, the coiling dragon spear, it took him a full 2 breaths of time before he managed to pierce through the vital part of Lao Ai's clone. Both Yen Dan and Yingzheng burst out laughing at Lao Ai, who had overestimated his own strength and wanted to be on par with them. Chapter 234. The moon was bright, and the stars were sparse. Wu Qi was sitting in the quiet room, and he could hear the sound of grass growing and flowers blooming in the surroundings. Winter had passed, and spring had arrived. The snow and ice on the land of Great Yen had thawed, and all living things were eagerly releasing the life force that had been accumulated for a few months. Flowers, grasses, and trees were busy sprouting. In this spring night that was full of life force, Wu Qi could even hear the moaning of she-bears coming from the courtyard next door. Xiong Qing brothers and a group of demon bears had caught a batch of she-bears who had just woken up from hibernation. They were excitedly carrying out the great plan of breeding the next generation. This was also the request of Xiong Wanling for all his offsprings. These days, all the demon bears in Black Wind Valley were working hard day and night, striving to expand the scale of the bear dens in Black Wind Valley. Are these the 153 she-bears that were harmed by the brothers? Wu Qi took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled a mixed aura that was intertwined with 5 colors. The energies in his body were further purified, and a tiny thread of innate nectar energy, about the size of a dust particle, was condensed from his internal organs, then slowly fused into the false cores in his arms. This was the total result of Wu Qi's hard work after a night of cultivation. After forming the innate gene Dan of 5 elements, the cultivation of Scroll of Stealing had slowed down abruptly. The realm of Gene Dan was still the period of foundation building for Scroll of Stealing. Furthermore, the foundation he needed to lay in this stage was thousands of times harsher than that of Xiantian realm. Sensing the 10 false cores in his arms that had become slightly brighter, Wu Qi pushed open the door of the quiet room and took a deep breath of the air that was mixed with the fragrance of plants and the stench of bears. In the courtyard next door, the she-bears were still howling. It was hard to tell if they were happy or in pain, but their howls could disturb one's mind, making Wu Qi have no idea what to say. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh as he gave the courtyard next door a quick glance with his divine will and said, 153 pristine she-bears have been ruined by you just like that. Stepping on the watery cloud, Wu Qi flew up into the sky and opened the mystic eyes of universe to look around. Vaguely, a divine light shot out from his pupils. Within a radius of 100 miles, even the movement of a single grain of sand could not be hidden from Wuqi's eyes. Within 1,000 miles, Wuqi could clearly see the silhouette of a night bird flying across the night sky in a panic. His field of vision was as far as 1,500 miles away. At this distance, he could see figures hiding in the deepest shadows. On the wall of Meng Fortress that had been repaired, a large group of Yen soldiers were patrolling back and forth. High up in the sky patrolling eagle guards flashed by with faint blue shadows. At a depth of 1,000 feet underground, great Yen cultivators were patrolling along the direction of the flow of the underground energy veins, keeping an eye out for any enemies that might show up at any time. Apart from the tiny light coming from the arrow towers, there was not a single light in the vast Meng Fortress. Wrong, there is still one place lit up. It was the window of the quiet chamber where Lu Qingfeng was cultivating not far away. After forming his Jin Dan, Lu Qingfeng's interest in the Tao of formation had increased by a few times. Now, he was studying the script of heaven patching formation day and night, and his enthusiasm was much greater than Xiong Qing and Xiong Qing, who were torturing the she-bears every single day. Wuqi looked around, clasped his hands behind his back, and stared lazily at the bright moon in the sky. Yingzheng, Xiangyu, what are you waiting for? Why haven't you shown up yet? 4 months have passed since that battle. Are you all waiting for others to make the first move? Yingzheng has many advisors around him, so he can stay calm and wait for the best opportunity to strike. But, Xiangyu, what are you waiting for? What are you trying to achieve by bringing an army to the north? Don't tell me you are just here for sightseeing. What exactly are you waiting for? It had been 4 months, and nothing had happened. The construction of Meng Fortress and all 270 outposts had been completed, and all defensive formations had been deployed. The front line of Meng Mountains had formed a complete defensive circle. However, the Qin army was nowhere to be seen, and no one knew where the army led by Xiang Yu was hiding. The feeling of having 2 ferocious tigers hiding right next to him was not a pleasant one. Especially since Wuqi was now in the front line, and was also the deputy chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters, it was even more unpleasant for him. Wuqi cursed angrily, then flipped his left hand and looked at the earth element dragon scale shield on his wrist. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. After extorting over 30,000 dragon scales from Weining Dragon King, Wuqi had selected a batch of the best quality dragon scales and fused them into the shield, refining it once again. Now, when the shield was activated, 36,000 dragon scales would soar up and cover his entire body according to the number of circulations. No matter it was the defensive strength or the offensive strength, it was much stronger than before. Nourished by the innate earth element energy essence, these dragon scales were growing stronger at all times. Wuqi calculated in his mind that if these dragon scales were not damaged in the next 1,000 to 800 years, perhaps all the dragon scales would be upgraded to the toughness of a heaven immortal realm true dragon armor. Stroking the smooth surface of the shield, Wuqi's mood gradually calmed down. No matter what Yingzheng and Xiang Yu were planning, with this shield, Wuqi had the confidence to save his own life. However, the feeling of having someone peeping at him from behind was not a pleasant one. On this warm spring night, Wuqi suddenly had an impulse to destroy something. It would be the best if he could kill someone and see some blood, as that would make his mood much better. The Xiong Qing brothers next door were roaring with laughter, as if they were fighting over the last female bear. This bunch of blind bears, I wish them kidney deficiency for the rest of their lives. Wuqi cursed viciously at this bunch of demon bears who still did not sleep in the middle of the night. Then, he rode a cloud and flew towards a small mountain outside Meng Fortress. This small mountain was a part of the defensive system of Meng Fortress, and it was densely surrounded by countless defensive formations. The person who was responsible for guarding this small mountain was none other than Nie Baihong, who had volunteered himself. In Ji City, Nie Yaonu claimed that she was going into a secluded cultivation to break through the nascent soul realm, but in fact, she was wholeheartedly cultivating and developing the overall strength of heaven-breaking sword sect's inner sect in the mine located deep in Meng Mountains. Therefore, Nia Baihong had become the person with the highest authority in heaven-breaking sword sect in name. As Great Yen was going to wage war against the outside world, it was his duty to lead a group of Jin Dan elders to guard Meng Fortress. As the cloud approached the nameless small mountain, a sword beam immediately shot out and stopped before Wu Qi. With an unsightly expression, Qin Shuwen blocked Wu Qi's path and asked with a gloomy voice, "Wu Qi, what is your intention of coming here in the middle of the night?" Looking at Qin Shuwen, Wu Qi smiled. Nia Baihong was not a kind and benevolent man. This time, he volunteered himself to bring the elite elder Jin Dan elders of heaven-breaking sword sect to Meng Fortress to help in the war, and all 27 elder Jin Dan elders were Yen Li's trusted subordinates. When facing the mighty Qin army, even gold core elders could be killed at any time. Qin Shuwen, who was forced to follow Nia Baihong to the front line, had no choice but to follow Nia Baihong to the front line. It would be strange if he could show Wu Qi a pleasant expression. Shaking his head, Wu Qi smiled and said, "So, it is Elder Qin who is on night watch today. It has been tough on you, really tough on you. I'll definitely report this to the chief supervisor of Ming City, and make sure that Elder Qin will be rewarded with a great military merit." Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi looked up at the bright moon in the sky and said with an indifferent tone, "Elder Qin, please tell the sect leader that the moon is bright and beautiful tonight," and Wu Qi suddenly has the desire to kill someone. Therefore, he is here to stab him with his sword. Ask him if he still remembers that innocent girl on the pleasure boat in the myriad Red River. Tonight is such a beautiful night, and it is the auspicious day when Wu Qi is going to stab him with his sword. Qin Shuwen was struck dumb and didn't say a word for a long while. At last, he gave Wu Qi a strange look, and a gloating smile emerged on his face. "Are you saying that you are going to stab sect leader with your sword? Ha, Wu Qi, you are rebelling against your superiors. You are." The deep and powerful voice of Nia Baihong was heard coming from afar. "Qin Shuwen, shut up, and do what you should do." A white light flashed, as Nia Baihong, who was shrouded in an immense sword energy, appeared right next to Qin Shuwen. He looked a few times fiercer than the first time Wu Qi saw him. He pressed his palm onto Qin Shuwen's body, unleashing an unparalleled sword energy that knocked Qin Shuwen several thousand feet away. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and slammed into a huge tree. Qin Shuwen gave Nia Baihong a venomous look, who was shrouded in a murderous aura, lowered his head and squeezed into the dark shadow. Raising his head and looking at Wu Qi, Nia Baihong asked in an indifferent tone, "I've been waiting for this sword of yours for a few months. You've already formed the Jin Dan, so why did you only come to me now?" "Thinking that such a sword was waiting for me, I couldn't eat or sleep well for the past few days." Wu Qi smiled, looked at the bright moon in the sky and said, "Tonight is a nice night, so I want to see some blood." Nia Baihong smiled and asked, "Is there any other reason?" Wu Qi moved his fingers and calculated for a while, then said hesitantly, "If I remember correctly, Wu Qi will be 18 years old when the sun rises, right? Just consider it as a birthday gift for myself, can't you?" Nia Baihong was stunned. "You're only 18 years old. Forming the Jin Dan. You little monster." After being stunned for a while, Nia Baihong knitted his brows and asked, "Are you really only 18 years old? I thought you should be at the same age as Duke Yen Lu, almost 30 years old, right?" Wu Qi touched his chin, chuckled and said, "Look at my youthful face, how can I be so old? Is an 18 years old Jin Dan that rare? Wu Qi is just lucky, and had some fortuitous encounters. That's why he has formed the Jin Dan at such a young age." Nia Baihong nodded his head slowly. As he was about to say something, Wu Qi suddenly narrowed his eyes. He waved his right hand, unleashing a dark sword beam that contained an invincible and fierce sword energy, piercing through Nia Baihong's chest in a blink of an eye. Nia Baihong let out a miserable howl. His chest was pierced by Wu Qi's sword beam, and a see-through hole about the size of a human head appeared. Blood sprayed out from his mouth as he was knocked flying several miles away, slamming into the cliff behind him. Wu Qi looked at Nia Baihong, who was knocked flying away, and said in a leisurely manner, "Today, you have roughly mastered the control of the wood element orb. That's why I stabbed you with this sword. With the protection of the wood element orb, at least you won't die, and at most, you will have to suffer some pain. Master, I hope you will remember this in the future. You and I are both a pitiful worm struggling in this world, and neither of us is nobler than the other." Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "In the future, before you kill someone with your sword, please think about this sword strike of mine before you strike." Suddenly, Wu Qi wielded his sword beam and transformed into a dark beam, shooting towards the depth of Meng Mountains. After sprinting for several thousand miles, Wu Qi came to the peak of a lofty mountain. Standing on the peak and looking at the silver moon hanging above his head, which was as big as a basin, Wu Qi suddenly threw his head back and cried out, "Master! Xiao Bai! Wu Qi is 18 years old now. I'm an adult now. Damn it, I miss you so much." Abruptly, he stretched out both hands, unleashing countless tiny sword beams that shattered the lofty mountain under his feet. Tears were streaming down Wu Qi's face. Suddenly, he cried out, "I really fucking miss you so much. I'm alone here." Wu Qi threw his head back and roared, "I don't want to be alone here. I want to go back. I miss you. I miss my dead brothers." Shrill howls of wolves could be heard coming from afar, mixing together with Wu Qi's roars and shouts, making them indistinguishable. Chapter 235. He threw his head back and roared into the sky. Large sheets of sword energies kept bursting out from the Jin Dan, transforming into mighty sword beams that tore through the void and shattered the lofty mountain beneath his feet. The acquired energies of 5 elements in his 8 extraordinary meridians, 12 principal meridians, and the main meridians kept rushing into the Jin Dan like a rising tide. Driven by the unity of sword energy script, they were quickly transformed into sword energies that were 10 times purer than ordinary sword energies. 5 acquired spirit pearls were wheeling rapidly around the Jin Dan, emanating an enormous pressure that had shrunk the size of Wu Qi's Jin Dan by half. The density of the condensed sword energies had become higher, purer, and more powerful. As the most profound technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, the core of the unity of sword energies script was to transform the energies into unique sword energies of 5 elements. After being highly compressed and condensed, once the sword energies of 5 elements were unleashed by heaven-breaking sword sect's 5 elements sword technique, their power would be at least a few times stronger than when unleashed by ordinary energies. Because of the spirit pearls of 5 elements, the degree of condensation of Wu Qi's sword energies was far greater than that of Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong, and the power of his sword energies was even more unstoppable. "Master, Xiao Bai. And, brothers." Wu Qi thrust both palms up into the sky, unleashing nearly all the sword energies of 5 elements he had condensed in his body at the same time. 2 dazzling beams that looked like flood dragons soared several tens of miles high into the sky, accompanied by loud swishing noises, and only faded away after a long while. Wu Qi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He circulated the unity of sword energies script over and over again. Seizing the opportunity when the spirit pearls of 5 elements suddenly became agitated, he quickly condensed his energies and transformed them into sword energies of 5 elements. After the transformation, the energies that filled the main meridians in his body were transformed into wisps of sword energies that were incredibly dense and thin like mist, flowing quickly in his meridians. Once again, his meridians became empty. Not far away from him, a lady clad in black clothes was seen riding on a 7-colored deer on top of a slightly shorter mountain. The woman's hair fluttered behind her like a cloud. She was so beautiful and elegant that she didn't look like she was in a trance. She looked like a soulless ghost, staring blankly at Wu Qi, who was crazily venting his anger on the mountaintop a few miles away. The night wind blew the woman's black dress, and the light muslin dress fluttered silently, adding a bit of charm to the air. The long dress that was blown by the wind clung tightly to the woman's curvaceous body, outlining the perfect curves of her body. Riding on the back of the elk, the woman was like a ball of frozen flame, deep and cold, mysterious and strange, giving people the illusion that they couldn't help but want to get closer, but once they did, they would be burned by the raging flames. Her hazy eyes stared at Wu Qi. Her flawless red lips suddenly opened and closed slightly. She sighed in a low voice. He is also a heartbroken person. She gently patted on the elk and drove it away. Then, her body moved slightly and arrived behind Wu Qi without causing any ripple of energy. The long dress on her body suddenly fell apart, turning into countless black gossamer threads that drifted in all directions, revealing a naked body that looked like it was carved out of white jade, with soft and beautiful lines. She spread her arms and gently hugged Wu Qi's waist from behind, gently twisting her waist. Are you Wu Qi? What an interesting kid, really interesting. Are you really cultivating that kind of childish cultivation technique that can sever human nature? I don't believe it. The woman's red lips gently pressed against Wu Qi's earlobe. She had a very tall stature, half a fist taller than Wu Qi. However, her body was slender and graceful, like a green bamboo amidst the morning mist in the mountains. Her swaying body was so beautiful that it could take one's breath away. Her long legs had already wrapped around Wu Qi's body. Her body was slightly trembling, whispering into Wu Qi's ear in a low voice, "The mountain wind is very cold, and the night is still young. Are you going to let me be disturbed by the cold wind here? Why don't you hug me? What are you waiting for?" Wu Qi's body turned stiff. He didn't even notice this woman's trace just now, and he didn't even know how this woman came to his back. However, judging from the touch of her body, the scent of her body, and the deep and lingering voice in his ear, Wu Qi didn't need to turn his head to know that this was a devastatingly beautiful woman. However, when faced with such a strange appearance, and a woman who had wrapped her arms around his body the moment they met, Wu Qi didn't feel any charm from her. Instead, cold sweat broke out from all over his body. His body was stiff, and he was ready to summon the 100 long-bow men from the spirit breeding ring. The woman's fingers lightly ran across Wu Qi's body, gently brushing past 2 sensitive spots on his chest. In the wilderness, there is no one around. The night is long and lonely, and the night wind is cold. It's fate that we can meet each other. I won't hurt you, and you won't hurt me. I'm a woman, and you're a man. We'll spend the night together, and when the sun rises tomorrow, you and I will be strangers. I don't seek to be with you all the time, I just want a night of pleasure. What are you waiting for? A gust of hot wind with a faint aroma blew into Wu Qi's ear, instantly destroying most of the wariness in his heart. He clenched his right hand, and the sword of greedy wolf transformed into a beam of dark light and fell into his hand. He raised his right hand, about to thrust the sword into the woman's body. "If you want to kill me, then do it now," the woman said coolly, "but I hope you can give up the sword in your hand, and use another weapon to pierce my body." A man, a real man, how could he only use the sword in his hand? These cold swords might be able to conquer the world, but if you want to conquer a woman like me, what you need is this divine weapon. The woman's hand slid down from Wu Qi's body, then forcefully grabbed onto Wu Qi's vital part. Her slender and beautiful fingers gently pinched a few times, and Wu Qi felt a stream of hot air rushing up from the soles of his feet to his head. Suddenly, every vein and muscle in his body was filled with hot blood, and every part of his body had become as hard as steel and as hot as fire. "Oh yes, this is the divine weapon I need. Put down the sword in your hand, I just want a night of pleasure." With a strange seduction, the woman whispered into Wu Qi's ear, "I am a woman, a very, very beautiful woman. My body, among all the beauties, is also the most beautiful body. I can give you the greatest pleasure." She giggled, licked Wu Qi's earlobe with her red tongue and said, "Also, I am a married woman. Don't you men always like to have bad thoughts towards other men's women? I am a beauty who can topple a nation, and I am someone else's woman. Are you really not tempted at all? Or perhaps, you don't have the courage to do so." The fingers that were gripping onto Wu Qi's vital part tightened abruptly, causing Wu Qi to feel a sharp pain. The woman said mockingly, "In fact, this thing of yours is just a decoration, useless to women." Or perhaps, you still don't know how to deal with women. In the middle of the night, in the middle of the night, in the wilderness, a beautiful woman appeared like a ghost, and even exposed her body to seduce him. Wu Qi felt as if he had fallen into an unreal dream. Everything was hazy and hazy. The temptation of the woman was so great that even Wu Qi didn't want to use the 7 holy deities and devils to calm his restless mind. Instead, he reached out and wrapped his arms around the woman's slender and strong waist, which was as smooth as jade. The moment he touched her, the skin of the woman was like a deep swamp, sucking Wu Qi's hand and soul deep into it. Wu Qi murmured to himself, I don't have any experience. Come on, my theoretical experience is more than enough to be a skill teacher for all the people in this world. The woman laughed provocatively and said, You have experience? Then, come and pamper me. In the next moment, Wu Qi's clothes had turned into ashes, and in the time it took to snap one's fingers, Wu Qi had entered deeply into the woman's body. He was like a piece of vajra that had been tempered 100 times, while the woman was like a melting pot that could melt gold and iron into liquid. They collided and rubbed against each other, splashing and splashing a large amount of steaming hot liquid metal. Again and again, puddles after puddles. Wu Qi had poured all of his spirit and energy into the first hand-to-hand combat in his life. When he was about the 20th time when his body broke down inside the woman's body, the faces of Princess Zhang Lo and Yutan suddenly appeared in front of him. After that, he was struck by an extremely evil and strange pleasure. Like the Xiongqing brothers, he howled and roared, turned the woman's body to another angle, and plunged deep into her body once again. The night passed in silence. At noon of the next day, Wu Qi and the woman woke up in a valley 100 miles away, hugging each other. Their bodies were intertwined with each other, fusing together without any reservation. Wu Qi still had a strong desire. Right in that valley, by the stream, on top of a large patch of flowers, they once again fell in love with each other. At dusk, the two, who had exhausted all their energy, slowly separated from each other and put on their clothes. Wu Qi frowned, looked at the woman in front of him, and asked coldly, Who are you? The woman gently combed her hair while facing the stream, giggled and said, Me? I am Yu Ji. I have a husband who is a mighty hero, and his name is Xiang Yu. Perhaps, you've already met him. He is a true hero. How can a little boy like you compare to him? Wu Qi was so angry that he almost choked. He stuck out his chest and said, Which part of me is inferior to him? Any man would be as angry as Wu Qi when he heard the woman he had just slept with say that he was inferior to another man. But soon, cold sweat broke out all over Wu Qi's body. He suddenly realized what the woman had said just now. She was Yu Ji, that Yu Ji. And her husband was that Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu. What had Wu Qi done? He had spent half the night last night and the entire day doing that with Xiang Yu's woman. He looked at Yu Ji in shock and shouted sternly, Why? Yu Ji smiled coquettishly and gently stroked the bun that she had tied up. She said softly, No reason, I'm just happy. After a slight pause, Yu Ji frowned and sighed softly, Maybe it's because I'm too lonely. Too bored. I haven't seen him for many years, and now I'm going to see him. Maybe I was too loyal to him in the past. I just want to do something to let him down now. Puffing out her towering breasts, Yu Ji giggled and said, He's too proud, so I want to find a man he will never look at in the eye and try this feeling of letting him down. You're the kind of man who has no right to be compared to him, so I did this with you. I'm very happy now, and my body is very happy. You've done very well in this matter. With a self-deprecating smile, Yu Ji said softly, It's just that, in my heart, it's very uncomfortable. I actually spent a night with a little kid like you, it's not worth it. Slowly standing up, Yu Ji said softly, For the sake of the great joy you've given me for the past day and night, I won't kill you. She hugged Wu Qi and kissed Wu Qi's lips hard. Then, Yu Ji took a few steps back and said with a sneer, When I want to do something to let him down again, I'll come find you again. You must think of me. My body is much better than your young princess's. With a ghostly chuckle, Yuji's body suddenly disappeared. With Wu Qi's current cultivation, he didn't even notice how she left. Wu Qi looked around in a daze. He felt that he was being raped both physically and mentally. Suddenly, he swung his sword and struck the cliff in front of him. Yuji. Xiang Yu. Fuck me. Fuck you. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.